Companies of all types and sizes rely on user experience designers to help make their technology easier and more enjoyable to use. The demand for user experience designers is so high that a lot of companies can't fill their job openings. Luckily, there are lots of people like you who are excited to enter the field of user experience design, also known as UX design. And here's the good news. UX designers come from all kinds of backgrounds and experiences. Lots of UX jobs don't require a specific work history or a college degree. In fact, some UX professionals have taught themselves the skills needed to land their first job. That's where this program comes in. Through these courses, you'll gain the foundational skills, hands-on experience, and confidence you'll need to become a UX designer. This program is for anyone who wants to find a job in UX design. And when you complete this program, you'll have the opportunity to share your information with top employers like Google that are interested in hiring entry-level UX designers. So, welcome to Google's Certificate in User Experience Design. We're so excited you're here. This program is split into 7 courses, with each course concentrating on a different part of UX design, from explaining the basics of UX design to designing your first prototype. Be sure to take the courses in order so you can build on your knowledge and skills as you go with every new assignment. Each of the 7 courses is broken down into weeks, and each week includes videos, readings, hands-on activities, discussion prompts, and quizzes. Whether or not you complete the material in a week is up to you. You have the flexibility to go at your own pace. Throughout this program, you'll learn how to conduct research, draw a wireframe, and create your own designs using tools like Figma and Adobe XD. You'll also complete 3 unique projects to demonstrate what you've learned and to earn your completion certificate. When you're finished, you'll have a portfolio of work, a polished resume, and interview skills to support you as you apply for jobs as a UX designer. Whether you've been experimenting in UX design for years, or you're completely new to the field, you can complete this program. Everything is entirely self-paced, which means you decide how much you want to do each week. Along the way, you'll learn from other Google employees or Googlers, each with their own unique perspectives and backgrounds. We'll share how we became UX designers, give professional tips, and provide you with a glimpse into our day-to-day work. Keep in mind, depending on where you work, your UX role might be general or specialized. Your responsibilities could vary widely from role to role. And so could the members of your team. We'll cover all that in more depth as we go. Because Googlers created this program, you'll learn the most practical information needed to launch your own UX design career. So let's meet your instructors. My name is Michael, and I'm an interaction designer in the Privacy and Data Protection Office at Google. I'll be your instructor for this course, where we'll cover the most fundamental principles of user experience design. I'm super excited to guide you through the first part of the program. Now I'll let the rest of the instructors introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a senior UX researcher for Google Assistant. I'll be your instructor for user research, empathize, define, and ideate, which is about understanding your user and the design problem you're trying to solve.
My name is Karen, and I'm thrilled to lead you in this next part of your UX design journey. I'm an interaction designer on the material design team at Google. We'll soon be creating storyboards, wireframes, and low-fidelity prototypes.
I'm Jason, the head of equity engineering at Google. I'm your instructor for Course 4, where we'll use your newly acquired research knowledge to conduct studies and test those early ideas.
Hi, I'm Kunal, a UX designer for the material design team. I'll be instructor for Course 5, where we'll cover how to create mockups and high-fidelity prototypes in Figma, a digital design program.
I'm Dave, and I'm a UX manager on Google Maps. I'll introduce you to Adobe XD, which is a design tool you'll use to create the second project for your portfolio. I'll be there to guide you through each step as you design a responsive website.
Hey, I'm Paolo, and I'm the director of UX for YouTube ads. I'll be your instructor for Course 7, where you'll create a third portfolio project and build a portfolio that's ready for the job market.
And I'm Shabby, an interaction designer for the Central Accessibility Organization. I'll be stopping by throughout the program to show you how accessible and inclusive design should be included in every step of the design process.
So you've met your instructors and heard a bit more about what you'll learn in this program. Coming up, we'll explore the field of user experience in more depth so you can decide if you want to pursue a career as a UX designer. Are you excited? Let's get started. Welcome to your first course. Anyone interested in UX design can complete this course because you don't need any previous experience in design and you don't need a college degree. In this first video, we'll cover the goals of the course and the history of UX design. UX designers help make technology easier to understand and more enjoyable to use. So when did the study of user experience, or UX, begin? Let's learn some quick history to get us up to speed. The phrase user experience was first coined in the 1990s by cognitive psychologist Don Norman as technology use expanded and evolved. Although the term came about relatively recently, the principles of user experience actually stretch back thousands of years, all the way to ancient China, where the practice of feng shui began. Practitioners believed that the arrangement of a physical space, like how furniture is positioned in a room, could bring someone luck or improve their health and happiness. Today, lots of different industries still rely on these same basic ideas. In the tech world, user experience mostly focuses on how people use or interact with products. In this course, we'll explore the foundations of UX design and why it's so important for consumers and businesses. We'll learn common terms, tools, and frameworks that UX designers use. We'll discuss how to plan and participate in design sprints, a common method for collaborating on projects. And finally, you'll begin to build your professional presence online, including starting your portfolio. To help keep track of what you're learning, you'll take practice quizzes and complete peer reviews and self-reviews. You'll get plenty of chances to go over the materials in practice. At the end of the week, you'll wrap up the course with a graded assessment to show what you know. So let's start at the beginning and learn the basics of user experience design. I started off my career in animation, and I worked in the industry for a number of years. And at one point, when I saw the internet really maturing and I saw all the opportunities online, I started to realize that there was a bigger canvas there where I could display my work. So I felt that I could pivot to UX design and use some of my interaction design skills that I inherited from that industry to help me in my career in UX design. One of my first jobs in UX was working at a startup. And it was a really great opportunity because I had the chance to work through the whole UX pipeline, all the way from doing research, all the way to launching the product. So I had the opportunity to wear a lot of hats, and I got to work with a lot of different people outside of my UX field, like engineers and project managers and things like that. So it was a really great opportunity to try all these different things and also just to learn the craft of UX in a very deep way. And at that time, I was the only UX designer at the company, so I was also doing branding and marketing and iconography and basically everything you can think of under the sun. I came in knowing some of the skills that I needed, but I actually learned quite a bit on the job. Just from working and collaborating with other people, I learned the process along the way. The more websites or the more products that got shipped, is the more I learned about the process and the more I started feeling more comfortable. It was really exciting to see a product finally launch that we've been working on for so long. And it was also really rewarding to get feedback from users about what they thought of the product that I've designed. So I'm super excited about this certificate because of all the opportunities it's going to give people around the world. When I first got started in UX, there weren't a lot of opportunities available for resources to get started. So I feel that this certificate really will help everyone, regardless of what your background is, regardless of whether you have a background in UX design or visual design or anything. you can get started with a certificate and you can get a really great foundation and get the UX design job of your dreams. Hi, my name is Michael, and I'm a UX designer at Google. Hi again. Earlier we discussed how UX designers help make technology easier to understand and more enjoyable to use. In this video, we'll define user experience and UX design. We'll review why UX design is important for consumers and businesses. Let's get started. The user experience is how a person, the user, feels about interacting with or experiencing a product. And a product is a good, service, or feature. It might be a physical product, like a video game controller, or a bag of potato chips, or a technology product, like an app, website, or smartwatch. There are many things that can make up a good user experience. In this video, we'll highlight some of them. For example, for a user to have a good experience, the product needs to be usable, equitable, enjoyable, and useful. Let's break that down. To begin, user experience is about improving usability, or making something easier to use. This means that the design, structure, and purpose of the product are clear to everyone. Think about a ketchup bottle. Historically, ketchup came in a glass bottle. The user had to hit the bottom of the glass to make ketchup come out. Often, no ketchup, or too much ketchup, would come out of the bottle. Today, the ketchup bottle has been redesigned into a plastic, squeezable bottle, which makes it easier to use and allows users to control how much ketchup comes out. UX designers need to think about every person who uses the product. This might include people with disabilities or people with very different life experiences from your own. For example, one user might find an app with a lot of text easy to use. On the other hand, a user with a visual impairment might want different features, like sound. Considering the unique needs of many different people is important work, and thinking about equitable design is key. Being equitable means your designs are useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities and backgrounds. User experience is also about making things enjoyable to use, which creates a positive connection between the user and the product. UX designers foster that positive connection by taking a user's thoughts and feelings into account when making products. Think about ordering takeout food online. When you search for a restaurant in Google or Yelp, you can see photos of dishes and read reviews from other people who have eaten there. This experience is enjoyable because you can make a more informed choice about what to order, leaving you feeling happier about the product. So, how do we figure out what makes a user happy with the product? That's where research comes in. To know how users feel, we have to collect evidence on how they're experiencing that product in real time, and ask them about it too. We'll discuss this in a lot more detail later. As humans, we want products that are useful, meaning they solve our problems. For example, if you're lost, a map app telling you how to get home is useful. But if the app can't find your current location, it's not so useful anymore. So now we know what it means for a user to have a good experience. Why is it important to business? In 2018, the research firm McKinsey & Company studied companies in 3 industries: medical technology, consumer goods, and retail banking. They found that, regardless of industry, businesses that focused on good usability and design perform better than their competitors. Basically, it comes down to this. When people like a product, they use that product a lot, and they recommend it to their friends. And more people using the product means better business for the company. Plus, when users have a good experience with the product, they're more likely to have a positive opinion of the company that made it. A win-win for the user and the business. Can you think of a product you love so much that you shared it with a friend? If you did, that's a great example of user experience design in action. Despite all this, a lot of companies don't understand the important role that UX design can play in improving their business, and that's where you, as a UX designer, come in. So now you know how to describe user experience and UX design, and you understand why UX design is important for consumers and businesses. Next up, we'll learn more about what UX designers do. Okay, so we've covered the basics of what user experience design is and why it's important. Now, let's discuss different roles within UX design and colleagues you might work with. UX designers come from a lot of different backgrounds: marketers, artists, teachers, small business owners, cashiers, or anything really. Rather than sharing similar work histories, UX designers tend to share common skills and interests instead. A lot of UX designers have a good sense for visuals, which means you recognize when an image fits or doesn't fit in a space, or what colors complement each other. But you don't need to know anything about graphic design or even be able to draw to be a UX designer. UX designers tend to be curious about people and like thinking about how people's minds work. They also enjoy figuring out how people use products and how to make those products easier to use. UX designers are empathetic too. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings or thoughts in a situation, and it's a major part of UX. Remember earlier when we mentioned equitable design and designing for everyone? Well, in order to design for everyone, we need to understand how a person might feel or what they might think in any situation. Just like a lot of UX designers don't share work histories, they don't always share educational backgrounds either. A lot of UX designers learn on their own by taking courses like this one and teaching themselves the skills they need to get entry-level jobs. They're pretty resourceful too, tapping their experience from other jobs or hobbies to build a foundation for their new careers. So, we've covered common characteristics of people drawn to UX design. Now let's explore what those UX designers actually do. When you think of the word design, you might think it's all about the visual aspects of a product. But it's only one small part of what the UX designers might do. In fact, there are many different kinds of UX designers: interaction designers, visual designers, and motion designers. Let's start with interaction designers, who focus on designing the experience of a product and how it functions. They figure out how to connect the user's needs and the business's goals with what's actually feasible to build. As an interaction designer at Google, my team and I are responsible for defining the user experience for security and privacy-related tools. In my world, users always come first. There are also visual designers who focus on how a product or technology looks. They might be responsible for designing logos, illustration, or icons. They might also decide font color and size or work on product layouts. Motion designers are another common type of UX designer. They think about what it feels like for a user to move through a product and how to create smooth transitions between pages on an app or a website. Similar to UX designers, there are also graphic designers who create visuals that tell a story or message. Graphic designers usually work on the appearance of a physical product, like an invitation or a poster, while UX designers focus on how users interact with a product. Outside of design, there are many other roles in the field of UX. Collaboration is an important part of a UX designer's job. So let's talk about a few of the most common colleagues a designer might work with. UX researchers conduct the studies or interviews that help us learn how people use a product. Then, there are UX writers who think about how to make the language within a product clearer to make the user experience more intuitive. This could include writing labels for buttons or adjusting the tone to be formal or friendly. Next up, we have production designers, who often act as a bridge between interaction designers and engineers. They make sure the first and final designs match in the finished product materials and that the assets are ready to be handed off to the engineering team. The assets are everything from text and images to the design specifications like font style, color, size, and spacing. Which brings us to the UX engineers, one of the groups that UX designers work with most frequently. UX engineers translate the design's intent into a functioning experience like a website or an app. And finally, UX program managers ensure clear and timely communication so that the process of building a useful product moves smoothly from start to finish. This might include setting up goals and writing project plans. In this video, we've explored different types of UX design roles you might pursue and introduce you to other colleagues you might work with. Coming up, we'll talk about how to create a good user experience through design. Welcome back. As you learn more about UX design, you might start noticing functionalities in phone apps or store layouts that you've never considered before. Have you ever created an account on an app and had no idea what to do next? Or have you pressed a button only to find out that what you thought was going to happen didn't? Predicting user roadblocks and potential design mishaps is what good UX design is all about. In this video, we'll explain what makes a user experience design good or poor. It might seem like a good design is based on personal preference, but most designs that are considered poor or unpleasant for the user don't reflect the user's needs. Think about a product as simple as a door. Have you ever tried to leave a room, pull the door handle, but the door didn't budge? That's because you were supposed to push the door handle, not pull it. As designers, we have to think about how to improve the user experience with the door so that we can easily exit and enter. Doors with this kind of poor user experience are called Norman doors. Remember Don Norman, who invented the term UX? In his book, The Design of Everyday Things, he first describes this phenomenon, and he explains how a user's experience isn't always considered in a product design. All right, so doors are just one example of user experience. Let's think about UX design in technology. Well-designed apps aim to save space on the screen by using icons instead of text, so more information can fit. Icons are also pleasing to look at and easy to understand, no matter the user's native language, but sometimes the meaning of an icon is impossible to figure out unless you tap on it. In that case, text would be a lot more useful. Good design considers the user's needs. For the user to have a good experience, the product needs to be usable, equitable, enjoyable, and useful, among other things. For example, the purpose of a shopping app is to buy things. If you put a pair of shoes in your virtual shopping cart, you expect to be able to buy them. But if you add the shoes to your shopping cart and are then told they are out of stock, that is not a good user experience. And good user experiences should create products that are intuitive and easy to use. Each product should be designed to make the user feel a certain way. A key task for UX designers is to tie a specific emotion to the experience of using the product. So, start paying attention to the things you use every day, the direction you have to turn the faucets in your bathtub, the way your baby's pajamas button, what error messages on your phone mean, and which way to open doors. You start to recognize both positive and negative aspects in each of their designs. Use your own experiences to think about what makes a design good or poor. What could be made better? What's already working? We're going to continue exploring these ideas during the rest of this course and for the entire program. Exciting, right? So far, we've explored the different types of UX designers. Over the course of this program, you'll become much more familiar with the most important tasks that UX designers do. You might even be drawn to a particular path or specialty. To get started, let's identify some typical responsibilities of entry-level UX designers: researching, wireframing, prototyping, creating information architecture, and communicating effectively. Entry-level UX designers start their careers by doing a lot of tasks to learn the basics. One of those tasks might be research. UX designers use research to understand audiences and learn about their backgrounds, demographics like age and location, motivations, pain points, emotions, and life goals. There's a lot to learn about users and their preferences, and UX designers want to discover as much as they can in order to inform their product's design. An entry-level designer also creates wireframes. A wireframe is an outline or a sketch of a product or a screen. It helps the designer figure out how a page is arranged, where each piece of a product fits in with the others, and how users will likely interact with the product. Wireframing is one of the first steps designers take when building a new product or feature. It's done after or at the same time as the research. We can wireframe by drawing on paper or digitally on a computer. Here are some examples of wireframes I've done. This is for a web page on Google's transparency report. Notice that they're just basic drawings, but you can tell what goes where. These wireframes were designed to demonstrate the basic structure of the page to gain support from key stakeholders, people with a business interest in the final product. A UX designer will also create prototypes. A prototype is an early model of a product that demonstrates functionality like a wireframe, but a lot more advanced. While a wireframe gives you a general idea of where things go and how the product will function, a prototype illustrates a progression from one screen to the next. We can draw prototypes on paper, create a physical prototype, or build a digital prototype. Here's a prototype for Google's transparency report that I created. And here's the final version. The purpose of wireframes and prototypes is to figure out the best design for a product, inexpensively and quickly. Another responsibility of an entry-level UX designer might include creating the information architecture, which is the framework of a website or how it's organized, categorized, and structured. For example, when you click the File menu on a word processing application like Google Docs, you expect certain options like New or Print to appear in the drop-down menu. Or when you click on a company's homepage, you expect to find a link to an About page. That structure is the website's information architecture. Finally, an entry-level UX design job, like many jobs, also requires a lot of communication, like meetings with colleagues, writing emails, creating proposals, or pitching clients. So in short, entry-level UX designers should know how to research, wireframe, prototype, create information architecture, and communicate effectively. Your exact responsibilities will vary depending on where you work and how specialized you need to be for your particular job. Up next, you'll learn about being a generalist or a specialist and what that means for your career options. Intrigued? Let's go.
My name is Dane, and I'm a visual designer at Google. The life of a UX designer at Google is pretty interesting and really fun. So when you're working on a product, you'll either be drafting up a new solution or a new feature of that product, or you'll be building upon something that already exists and finding a way to improve it. You'll start by identifying the problems. What are the issues going on within this product, and why are we even looking to improve or introduce this feature? And once you start to find those problems, you'll start to realize what the solution is and why it needs to be done a certain way. You chat with other people on your team to see what solutions could be feasible, and you get to work. You're going to be interacting with everybody on your team. There are other visual designers that you can chat with. There are researchers that can tell you what has been decided in the past and what hasn't been explored yet. There's also interaction designers who can tell you, oh, well, this page should move in this way, or this should happen as soon as you tap this button. This is an opportunity to get the feedback that you really need to be able to push your project to success. Once you go into a UX critique session, you'll present that to the team, and that's when you'll start to get really high-level feedback as to how the interaction should change or how it can be improved for the success of the product. When you're a full-time UX designer, you're going to expect a lot of critiques, a lot of UX critiques that help contribute to the success of the product. And what's really important is to remember that it never has anything to do with you as the designer. It just has to do with the solution and how we can collectively make sure it's the best that it could possibly be. And as soon as you come to a solution, that's when you go in and you chat with the higher-ups and the leads to see if this is a solution that's ready to be implemented. And once you get the pass for it to be implemented, you then start passing it on to engineers who will be able to build out your solution, and then you get to see it come to life. As a visual designer, being able to create something that's going to impact other people every single day And because I'm focusing on the front-facing visuals, it's our job to determine how this is going to look and how it's going to work for people. And I think having that impact and having that role is pretty important and pretty meaningful as a UX designer.
Hi again. So far, we've learned about some of the tasks an entry-level UX designer might do each day. We've also mentioned that your role might differ depending on where you work. In this video, we'll explain the differences between generalists, specialists, and T-shaped roles in UX design. A generalist is a UX designer with a broad number of responsibilities. Most UX designers begin their careers this way, doing various tasks. For example, you might do a bit of interaction design work, a bit of visual design work, and more. One benefit of being a generalist is that you get to try out roles and find a specialty that you're passionate about. Generalist UX designers are common at smaller companies with fewer employees, as these companies don't have big design departments, so you might have to wear many hats. A generalist might be responsible for a combination of user research, branding, user flows, UX writing, visual design, prototyping, production design, information architecture, and usability testing, among other things. Most generalists start their roles knowing about one or two of these topics. They learn about other areas on the job from their colleagues or mentors. UX generalists can also continue their education through professional development, doing their own research to keep up with industry trends and participating in online UX communities to learn from other designers. On the other hand, if you become really interested in one part of UX design, you might find your niche as a specialist. A specialist dives deep into one particular UX design role, like interaction, visual, or motion design. While a generalist has a breadth of knowledge, a specialist has more depth of knowledge in one kind of UX design. Specialists usually work at large companies where the organization can afford to have a big team of UX designers. At Google, we have thousands of specialized UX designers. Take me, for example. I specialize in interaction design. We covered some specialist tracks earlier in the course. If you need a refresher, check out the glossary. As you advance in your career, you may become a T-shaped designer. A T-shaped designer specializes in one kind of UX design and has a breadth of knowledge in other areas. This is called a T-shaped designer because your skills look like an uppercase T. The vertical line of the T is the kind of UX design you specialize in, like visual design. The horizontal line across the top of the T includes your complementary skills. These skills might come from other fields like interaction design that cross over with your specialties or soft skills that help you work more effectively. Becoming a specialist or generalist isn't always a conscious choice. It might be based entirely on where you work and what skills are needed. When I started in UX design, I was a motion graphics designer. Then I worked on video games, apps for businesses, and apps about financial technology. Now that I work at Google, I focus on privacy as an interaction designer. The more experience you get in the industry, the broader your perspective. You'll be exposed to a lot of different companies, design principles, and work styles, and you'll learn how each one can better inform your designs. As a UX designer, there's always room to grow and opportunities for change. So whether you become a generalist or a specialist, there are plenty of options.
My name is Erika, and I'm a senior visual designer. A visual designer is someone who uses iconography, typography, color, space, and textures in their products to create consistent and accessible design patterns. For example, if you were to look at an app, pretty much anything you see on the surface, the buttons, the colors, the typography, the white space around all of those elements is what a visual designer would be responsible for. During my last year of college, I worked at a web design and development agency where I got a ton of experience with graphic design and actually UX design before I even knew what that was. From there, I went to work at a startup called Waze before they were acquired by Google. And there I was hired just as a general designer, where I worked on things like our website, our app, designing little icons, illustration, research. I was considered a generalist, and I worked on a lot of different design roles. From there, we were acquired by Google, and so my role became a little bit more formalized, and I was technically a UI designer, but I still was a generalist, and I worked a lot on marketing design, the app UX, and as well as a lot of web design for things like dashboards and analytics. I kind of branched out to the visual design path at Google, and that's what I've been ever since for the last few years. As a generalist designer, you work on a bunch of different things, from interaction design and visual design to user research. This would typically happen at maybe a startup or an agency where you work on a variety of different projects. And your responsibility depends on whatever hat you need to wear that day. Some of the benefits of being a generalist designer are that you can learn a ton, and oftentimes this will be in like a fast-paced environment. So you don't really have time to stop and really go deep into any of these roles. Rather, you just learn by doing, and it's a really quick and effective way of seeing what all the possibilities are within UX. At bigger companies, there are specialist designers. For instance, at Google, there are interaction designers, visual designers, UX engineers, UX writers, and UX researchers. For these roles, the expectations are a little bit more clear for you. So you'll be evaluated based on what work you're doing specifically within a product. So a UX writer will be responsible for all of the copy and all of the strings throughout any product you might see. And they are, within their team, known to be the expert in their field. The benefits of being a specialist are that the expectations are very clear for what your role is, and there are a ton of resources that you can continue to just develop your expertise. And what I like about being a specialist is that I know that anyone on my team trusts and knows my work and can come to me with any of their visual design problems. Having been both a generalist and a specialist, I've really, really enjoyed both. And especially earlier on in my career, being a generalist, it was a really good way for me to ramp up on all things UX. I got to work on such a variety of projects, and it really, really helped me hone my craft. Once I had been in the UX space for a while, I realized that I really was kind of more drawn to visual design challenges, and that's what kind of led me along the visual design path. And so now, being a specialist, it feels good to know that you're kind of an expert in your field. And so I can definitely see the benefits in both being a generalist and a specialist, and maybe more so being a generalist when you're first starting out.
So far, you've learned about common responsibilities of UX designers and the types of roles that UX designers might have. But, like many people, UX designers don't work alone. They work on cross-functional teams that might include other designers, engineers, researchers, product leads, or program managers. In this video, we'll discuss how these cross-functional teams work together to build a product. Imagine you're working on an app for ordering food. You and your team want to build a new feature that shows users restaurants that offer allergen-free meals. The product lead decides the scope of the project. The UX researcher tries to understand user trust, like whether users will trust the information about allergens or trust the app itself. The interaction designer figures out the flow for ordering, like how to include allergen-free foods in the search filter. The visual designer thinks about how to make it easy for users to find allergen-free foods in the product. These UX designers create wireframes and prototypes to show the experience that users will have in the app. The engineers bring these wireframes and prototypes to life and create ways for restaurants to each add information about their allergen-free options. As you might have noticed, it's important for UX designers to collaborate with engineers because engineers build the final product. This collaboration happens throughout the entire process. There are multiple opportunities for UX designers and engineers to provide feedback to each other to make their changes together. There are a lot of moving parts here. This is where the program manager comes in, to ensure clear and timely communication across the team, so the process of building useful apps moves smoothly from start to finish. Every team and team member has a different task to complete, but ultimately, they all have the same goal: to build a product that's usable, useful, equitable, and enjoyable for users and businesses. Coming up, we'll discuss the types of companies UX designers work at. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how many options you have. Welcome back. So far, we've discussed why user experience is important, the job responsibilities of a UX designer, and the teams that UX designers often work with. Now we're going to explain the types of companies you could work at as a UX designer, and how your job may differ depending on that company's size and industry. Say you're hired by a startup or a small business. First, what's a startup? Well, in simple terms, a startup is a new business that wants to develop a unique product or service and bring it to market. Startups generally have tight budgets and few employees, so each person has to perform a variety of jobs and move quickly. If you're a UX designer at a startup or other small businesses, you'll likely be a generalist. Designers at companies with fewer employees get involved in many parts of the business. You might be responsible for both interaction and visual design, conduct user research, or even help with marketing. Talk about having a lot of jobs to do. Working at a startup or small business can be stressful, but also very rewarding. You'll learn quickly, so it can be a great way to launch your career. Another job a lot of UX designers start out in is freelance. Freelancers work for themselves and market their services to businesses to find customers. As a freelancer, you get to pick projects that interest you, make your own schedule, and work with a lot of different brands. Another common place UX designers work is at advertising agencies. Advertising agencies are teams of creatives hired by clients to build marketing campaigns. For example, a beverage company might hire an ad agency to create a campaign for a new soda. As a UX designer, you might be responsible for developing wireframes and designs for digital products for the new campaign. You may also do work that's outside of the usual UX design tasks, like graphic design or writing. Working at an ad agency is a lot like freelancing in that you get to work with a bunch of different brands, but you'll be employed by the agency instead of being self-employed, and you'll be part of a team. Design agencies and design studios are another option for jobs. A design agency provides a one-stop shop for the look of brands, products, and services. They're usually more specialized than ad agencies because they focus on design and branding. Your average day working at a design agency is a lot like working at a startup. You'll probably be a generalist and the only designer on the project. You'll be exposed to a lot of different industries and get to solve unique problems. But since design agencies work with multiple clients, you might not work on a project from beginning to end. UX designers at design agencies regularly move between teams and work on different stages of a product's development. Finally, you can work as a UX designer at a big company like Google. Big companies have thousands of employees working on lots of different projects. UX designers are typically specialized in their work and focus on one project from beginning to end. Working at a big company is a great way to learn about a specialization within UX design. Plus, you get to learn from other experts. One trade-off is that you might have fewer options to gain skills outside of your specific role, so a desire to specialize is key. Now that you know what's out there, which types of companies are you most excited about working at? If you're inspired, share it with other learners in the discussion forum. You're making awesome progress. You've learned all about the UX design industry and explored where you might work. Now, let's talk about common career paths for UX designers and the kinds of jobs you'll be qualified for after you complete this program. An internship is a great way to start your career. An internship is usually a short-term job with limited responsibility. You often work closely with a supervisor to learn more about a job or industry that you are interning in. It's a fantastic way to get real job experience. Plus, an internship might lead to a full-time job in the future. Another way to start your career is an apprenticeship. Apprenticeships provide on-the-job training to help you develop real skills. Apprenticeships are similar to internships because you work closely with an experienced professional. However, apprenticeships generally last longer than internships, around 1 or 2 years instead of a few months, and apprenticeships are always paid. You could also explore freelancing, which we discussed earlier. You may recall, freelancers work for themselves and market their services to businesses to find customers. Working as a freelancer can help you gain experience on real UX design projects. A good way to get started as a freelancer is to offer your services to a small business or a nonprofit in exchange for a good recommendation and a project to include in your portfolio. Once you have a couple of projects under your belt and some references, you can begin charging customers. If you're excited to explore freelancing, we'll discuss it more in detail at the end of this program. The most common way to start your career in UX design is an entry-level job. Entry-level jobs are roles that do not require prior experience in the field. The skills and portfolio pieces you'll develop in this program will help you get started as an entry-level UX designer. Plenty of companies might be interested in hiring someone who's completed this program and produced a portfolio of outstanding work, someone like you. A job that says it requires a year of experience might instead accept your certificate and portfolio as proof that you have the skills for the job. It clearly communicates your value, so don't limit yourself.
Hi, my name is Juan. I'm a visual designer at Google, and I'm from Dominican Republic, especially from a small town in DR where I don't have access to internet. My passion for computer and internet was very, very high, that every day after school, when I get home, I take my CPU and put it in my head and walk more or less 1 mile to connect to this small lab, because this was the only location in my town where I can get access to internet. And the first thing that I do when I went to the lab was open googlesearch.com and just find tutorial about how use Photoshop, how use the software that people in that time used for design. And I remember that was very fun to me. I'm an immigrant. I remember I moved to United States like 10 years ago, and I can find job in design because first, struggle, I can speak English. Even now, probably you need to use subtitles to understand me well, because even now I can speak English very well, but I try. As immigrants, when we came from our country to United States, the first idea that we have in mind is just apply in fast food. I remember back 10 years ago, when I moved to Connecticut, I went to multiple fast food places and I never get a job. And my first job experience in the United States was cleaning toilet in a hotel. I really love that job. I never imagined that years later, I'm gonna start my first career in design. How I get from working from a hotel, doing housekeeping work, into Google is interesting. It's a crazy and interesting journey. I apply in others design in a studio, and I learned a lot doing draft or rough design for digital agencies. And after a couple of years working on the industry, I just studied by myself using Google search to find how you Photoshop, how you internet, how you freehand, and all the design software. And after that, I remember that a friend suggested me like, hey, I think you should work for Google. You have the potential to work for Google. But at that time, I don't believe that I can work for Google because I never went to college. All the design thing that I know, I learned by myself. She recommended me. I didn't get the job. I didn't pass the second call from the interview process. Year later, the recruiter contacted me and because they think that I could be a good fit for the company. I received an email, hello from Google. And that was really interesting because in the beginning, I thought that was a spam. But I decided to open because I'm curious. And when I read the email where the recruiter say, hey, we believe that now you could be a good fit for the company and we want to have a call with you. Are you still want to work for Google? Of course, I was very nervous. I can't believe that I was reading that email. that Google want to have a call with me. I feel very important. And of course, after 10 minutes, after take a deeper breath, I decided to answer the email. And I answered, and the recruiter was very humble. They made me feel important. They was very friendly with me. And this kind of interaction made me feel more confident. Then I moved to the second step of the interview with a visual designer, where that person was asking me questions about how I design, what is my design process. They try to understand how I work. And the next step was go to the office and have an interview in person with 8 people. That was very intimidating to me. Again, especially that I don't speak English, but I prepare myself. I have a problem with my language, but I know that I was good in my design. I feel confident with that. And what I did amazing presentation with a lot of interaction because I want to show them all my potential. And then I received the call that they want to hire me. I really like to share this because sometimes we don't believe that we can go far. And me, that I came from a village or a small town in the Caribbean without internet access and now working for Google is something that made me feel proud.
My name is Mike, and I'm a design manager at Google. Growing up, I always had a computer in the house, and mostly we would play games and things like that, but we learned to be comfortable with a PC early on. When I was in high school, I was in a drafting class, and we used computers to draw. I spent a lot of extra time learning from the teacher outside of class hours, playing on the computer. So around that time, I moved from the Northeast. I was just outside of Philadelphia in South Jersey. So I moved to the South in North Carolina. And there was a lot of culture shock for me and also sort of a disconnect of parents. There was a lot of autonomy or sort of freedom in a lot of ways. So I ended up dropping out of high school just for a number of those discomforts and kind of wandered off on a different path for a while. I did a number of different things. I worked at car washes. I worked at restaurants. I did network cabling. I installed network cabling in offices and buildings. Eventually, I bought a computer a few years later and started tinkering again. So I started learning the tools to create a website for my dad's company. So now I had kind of a client. And I just learned. I just kept learning one thing after the other. I'd build it, design it, publish it. And then I started wanting to make it do more. And I wanted it to have some functionality. So I started learning simple scripting, and it just kind of continued to evolve from there. In the beginning, you're learning things so quickly, and there's just like this excitement that comes with everything that you figure out that works. And in one day, you could figure out how to do a layout and manipulate colors and fonts, and each one of those is like a little win. It's just like a little boost that keeps you going for the next thing. And eventually they get harder and harder, and soon enough you're building fairly complex systems. I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome even to this day, and I've been in my career for 25 years. Sometimes it's just struggling to figure something out and then just starting to fall into the pit of thinking I just can't do it, and then I just drive myself forward, just kind of a work ethic approach. Persistence was a lot of it, and also not being afraid to ask others or to look for other inputs and resources. You can't do and solve everything by yourself. Knowing when you're stuck and maybe why you're stuck, and thinking of creative ways to get unstuck, that really helps with imposter syndrome. And that's true today. The nature of my work isn't as technical as before. When I run up against something I haven't dealt with before, I don't feel like I'm the most informed person in the room. I listen or ask questions. I try to find other resources to become more informed.
Okay, we've sure covered a lot this week. Let's quickly recap what you've learned. We've explored how this program works, the definition of UX design, why UX design is important for consumers and businesses, the different roles within the field of UX, what makes a user experience good or poor, an entry-level UX designer's job responsibilities, how a UX designer works with cross-functional teams, differences in UX design jobs, depending on company size and industry, and how to pursue a career in UX design. We've got a lot more exciting topics to come. As you continue through the program, think about the type of job you might be interested in pursuing when you're done. Every new thing you learn here takes you closer to your first role in UX design and closer to landing your dream job. Up next, we'll explore common concepts, tools, and frameworks that UX designers need to know to excel in their careers. Keep up the great work. Hi there, great to see you again. We just finished learning about why UX design is important, an entry-level UX designer's job responsibilities, and how to pursue a career in UX design. Coming up, we have a lot of exciting material to cover. We'll start by introducing you to common UX design terms and frameworks. We'll think about user-centered design and how it's applied. We'll introduce you to popular UX design tools, and we'll learn how UX designers think across platforms, from mobile apps to hardware devices. First, I'd like to share a little about myself. My path to Google wasn't straightforward. I started my career in industries like animation and gaming, and I moved to UX design later. So I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to learn new skills and enter the world of design for the first time. I love teaching and sharing my knowledge because it allows me to help others overcome hurdles that I myself may have encountered. Good luck as you continue the program. So, let's start by identifying the difference between user and end user. In the field of user experience design, one of the most important terms is user. A user is any person who uses a product. In addition, the end user is the specific audience a UX designer creates something for. Our goal as UX designers is to think about problems and needs from the end user's perspective and design an experience to meet those needs. Think of it like this. An animated movie about talking cars is designed with kids ages 5 to 7 in mind. Those kids are the movie's end users, but adults and teenagers will be in the audience too. So they're also users. User experience is how a person, the user, feels about interacting with or experiencing a product. Do you think everyone in the theater experiences the movie the same way? Not likely. But if the end users, 5 to 7-year-old kids, stay focused, laugh a lot, and cheer at the end, it's safe to say it was a good user experience. On the flip side, if those kids don't want to watch the movie again, they probably had a bad user experience. When it comes to evaluating user experience, there are a few key questions to examine. Is the product easy to use? Is the product equitable? Does the product delight the user? Does the product solve the user's problem? Answering yes to these questions are all goals of a good user experience, as we previously learned. And these are questions UX designers are constantly asking themselves to create great user experiences. As a UX designer, you will focus on the end user, acting as the user's advocate and balancing business needs. Your team members might prioritize other goals for a product, like sales or marketing. And some stakeholders might forget the fact that they are not the end user. That's why you, as a UX designer, need to keep the end user as your main priority. For example, imagine you're developing a children's toy. Your sales and marketing teammates might try to encourage parents to buy the toy. But ultimately, you need to design the toy to appeal to the child, who is your end user. Okay, now that you know the meanings of key terms like user, and user experience, so it's time to move on to frameworks. Hi, in this video, we're going to explain user-centered design. Why is it important that designs are centered on the user? Because the user buys and uses your product. In addition, it's also important to solve problems that people actually experience, rather than only trying to solve problems you personally experience. Focusing on real user problems reduces the impact of designer bias. Larry Page, one of Google's founders, highlighted just how important user-centered design is when he said, "There is no substitute for personally watching and listening to real people. At Google, we take this to heart. Larry's statement has morphed into one of Google's core values today. Focus on the user and all else will follow. User-centered design puts the user front and center. Focusing on the user means considering their story, emotions, and the insights you've gathered about them. To keep our focus on the user-centered design process has 4 steps: understand, specify, design, and evaluate. Following this framework helps us build products people actually want to use. First, understand how the user experiences the product or similar products. Really understanding the end user requires a lot of research, and we'll talk more about this later. Next, specify the end user's needs. Based on your research, you'll narrow down which end user problem is the most important to solve. Then, design solutions to the end user's problem. This is where you'll come up with ideas for what the product might look like and actually start building the product. And finally, evaluate your design against your end user's needs. Does your design solve the end user's problem? You'll find out here. And you'll also do it by testing your product with real people. It's important to keep in mind that as you go through this process, iteration is key. Iteration means doing something again by building on previous versions and making tweaks. Let's think about an example of user-centered design in the real world. 5 years ago, we launched Google Photos as a place to store photos and keep them organized. Over time, we noticed that users also want to revisit memories and relive treasured moments. To make it easier for users to do this, we used the user-centered design process to redesign Google Photos. Now users can easily search to find their memories. So, now you understand the importance of user-centered design and why designers always keep the user front and center. Up next, we'll check out 2 additional frameworks that are popular among UX designers. See you there. Welcome back. Now that you've learned about the users, end users, user experience, and the user-centered design process, we're ready to go through other common user experience frameworks and their purposes. A framework creates the basic structure that focuses and supports the problem you're trying to solve. You could think of frameworks like outlines for a project. There are many UX design frameworks, and over time, these evolve or become obsolete thanks to the fast-changing world of technology. We've already discussed the user-centered design process. Now let's check out 2 other frameworks you might use: the 5 Elements framework and the Design Thinking framework. The 5 Elements of UX design is a framework of steps a designer takes to turn an idea into a working product. This framework consists of, wait for it, 5 elements: strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. Each element refers to a specific layer involved in creating the user experience, and each layer is dependent on the one below it. The bottom layer is strategy. This is where you'll define the user's needs and business objectives. The next layer is scope. This is where you'll determine what you're building. You'll decide on features and content to be included in the product. The third layer is structure. You'll figure out how to organize your design and how the user will interact with it. The next layer is the skeleton, which you can think of as the layout. Similar to how the layout of our bones shape our skin, this layer helps detail how the design works. But just like our bones, the user won't see these inner workings. Instead, you'll see the surface, which is the top level of the user experience. The surface is how the product looks to the user. So to recap, we have strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. Together, these layers make up the 5 Elements framework. A second common framework is design thinking. Design thinking is a way to create solutions that address a real user's problem and are functional and affordable. Design thinking has 5 actionable steps: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. The first step is empathize, which is about discovering what end users really need and learning how to think and feel like them. You might conduct surveys, interviews, or observation sessions to paint a clear picture of who your end users are and the challenges they face. The next step is to define the problem by creating a clear problem statement. The problem statement is a clear description of the user's need that should be addressed. The problem statement should be based on user research, and it focuses the team on a clear goal. We'll talk about problem statements in more detail later. Once we've defined the problem, we can start to ideate or brainstorm solutions. You should aim to come up with as many ideas as possible. By focusing on the quantity of the ideas, not the quality, you're more likely to come up with innovative solutions. Eventually, we need to narrow down to a few ideas that we can prototype. A prototype is a scaled-down version of a product that shows important functions. You should have a clear goal for your prototype in mind. And finally, we test the prototypes with users. Testing keeps the user front and center, as it gives users an opportunity to provide feedback before the product is built. Based on user feedback, you can make changes and improvements, or come up with a completely new idea. Okay, now you know 3 of the most used frameworks in UX design: the user-centered design process, the 5 elements framework, and the design thinking framework. Adapting any of these frameworks to suit your specific design needs is really important. Depending on what company, team, or project you work on, you won't use the same framework every time. Coming up, my colleague Shabi will talk about inclusive design. Enjoy.
Hey there, I'm Shabi, an interaction designer here at Google. My role focuses on scaling accessibility across Google's design systems. After high school, I wasn't really sure what kind of career would be a good fit for me. I was interested in technology, but I didn't have any technical knowledge, so I was afraid I wouldn't do well in the field. But eventually I realized what a huge impact advances in tech had on society and my life. I wanted to harness this power to positively affect the lives of people around me, especially those who tend to be marginalized or forgotten. As an intern in UX design, I worked on products for people with chronic pain. I realized how important and impactful it is to consider the needs of people with disabilities and how much I wanted to create products to help them. So I continued researching and empathizing with those who are disabled to understand how I could uplift them with my work. It's a passion I'm looking forward to sharing with you during this program. So far, you've learned about user-centered design, which concentrates on meeting users' needs. As we mentioned before, there are many UX design frameworks, and those frameworks change over time. In this video, we'll talk about 3 more ways to put the user first in your designs: universal design, inclusive design, and equity-focused design. Let's start from the beginning. When designers began considering how to include an even broader range of people in their designs, they called it universal design. Universal design is the process of creating one product for users with the widest range of abilities and in the widest range of situations. Think of it like a one-size-fits-all approach. Designers propose one solution for everyone. The problem is that when you focus on creating one solution for everyone, the designs lose their effectiveness. It's often difficult to achieve any goals with your product when you have so many intended users. It's like when you go to a store that sells a hat in just one size. The label might read, "One size fits all," but the hat still won't fit a lot of people. Universal design had the same problem. even though it had the intention of being inclusive, it excluded a lot of people. It turns out one size fits all isn't a great solution. As UX designers realized that universal design didn't meet the needs of every user, the approach to including people began to change. Designers started thinking about the concept of inclusive design, which focuses on finding solutions to meet different needs. Inclusive design means making design choices that take into account personal identifiers like ability, race, economic status, language, age, and gender. Inclusive design includes researchers and designers from traditionally excluded populations in the process, so they can provide their unique perspectives during all phases of the design process. If universal design is a one-size-fits-all solution, then inclusive design can be described as solve for one, extend to many. With inclusive design, you solve for one type of user, and the benefit of that solution can extend to many other types of users. Our goal as designers is to build experiences that are accessible to users with the widest range of abilities. In other words, no one should be excluded from using a product that we built because we didn't consider their needs when building it. In inclusive design, there's no such thing as normal. There's no average person or target audience that we should design for. For example, when designing, we focus on the needs of people who are blind and deaf, even more than we consider the needs of those who rely on their sight and hearing to communicate. Then, as we build more versions of a product, we design for additional excluded groups, like those with physical or cognitive disabilities. Designing products, devices, services, or environments for people with disabilities is called accessibility. Accessibility is just one aspect of inclusive design, and we'll explore accessibility in more detail later. But keep in mind that the idea of solve for one, extend to many only benefits the group the design was created for and existing users. Many groups are still left out. Over time, UX designers realized that inclusive design wasn't always enough. And that's where we find ourselves today, as equity-focused design becomes a new industry goal. Equity-focused design takes the idea of inclusive design one step further. It asks designers to focus on designing for groups that have been historically underrepresented or ignored when building products. The goal of equity-focused design is to uplift groups that have been excluded historically. In order to design with equity as a goal, we first need to know the difference between equality and equity. The two words sound similar, but they're actually two different concepts. Equality means providing the same amount of opportunity and support to all segments of society. In other words, everyone gets the same thing. Equity means providing different levels of opportunity and support for each person in order to achieve fair outcomes. To better understand the difference between equality and equity, check out this illustration. The illustration on the left represents equality because every person gets the same box to stand on. But because each person is a different height, the tallest person has a better view. The illustration on the right represents equity because each person is given what they need. The shortest person is given the tallest stack of boxes to stand on. So, let's explore how this relates to design. Equity-focused design is a newer concept in UX and one that we often discuss at Google. Instead of building products for groups of people who are currently being excluded, which is the goal of inclusive design, equity-focused design seeks to build products that meet the needs of specific individuals and groups who have been excluded in the past. So what does this look like in the real world? Start by identifying a product you want to build. Then, think about the groups that have not been served by this type of product in the past. Finally, build your design while keeping the groups you identified as underrepresented front and center. It's important to keep in mind that equity-focused design doesn't solve all problems, just like inclusive design and universal design don't either. The key point is that these are all different approaches to solving issues of underrepresentation and designing for a more equitable future. These issues are massive, but vitally important. Often, schools and companies consider accessibility, inclusive design, and equity-focused design as methods to consider during the design process, but not as a requirement. But I'm a firm believer that every designer should know the basics of accessibility and why creating products for those who are underrepresented and excluded is a must. As you continue through your career, you'll gain more practice and understanding on how to implement these ideas. We'll get to some more applications of this soon. Hi there! Earlier, we introduced inclusive design as a method for making design choices that take into account personal identifiers like ability, race, economic status, language, age, and gender. And one of the biggest parts of inclusive design is designing for accessibility. In this video, we'll explore the concept of accessibility. First, we'll review what accessibility means in the field of UX design. Then we'll discuss how many people have a disability globally. Finally, we'll go through 3 ways to think about disability. Let's recap. The term accessibility refers to the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people with disabilities. We call it A11Y in the industry, and it's something that should guide all of our work. And because I'm sure you're wondering, the 11 in the middle refers to the number of letters between the first letter in the word accessibility and the last letter. All right, let's zoom out a little. What are some of the groups of people we're considering when we think about accessibility? In academia and the tech industry, we tend to think about accessibility in 4 big categories: people with motor disabilities, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people with cognitive disabilities like developmental, learning, or intellectual disabilities, and people with vision disabilities. It's also important to keep in mind that some people have concurrent disabilities, where, for example, a motor or cognitive disability can contribute to challenges with speech. It's easy to assume that accessibility just means solving for one specific need, like mobility, but accessibility is much broader than that. Accessibility is about making things accessible to all people, whether they have an obvious disability or not. You might be surprised to find out that more than 1 billion people around the world have a disability. That's right, 1 billion. That's out of a global population of 7.8 billion. This means 13% of people around the world have a disability. In the US, 1 in 4 adults identifies as having a disability. In other words, people with accessibility needs are a huge percentage of the population, and we're missing out on helping a lot of users if we don't build accessible products. But demographics can be misleading. There are a lot more people with a disability than the statistics account for. In the disability community and as UX designers, we focus on the social model of disability, which defines a disability as being caused by the way society is organized or how products are designed, rather than a person's ability or difference. As designers, we need to account for disabilities that are permanent, temporary, or situational in our designs. Someone with a permanent disability might have permanent loss of hearing, sight, or smell. Someone else might have a temporary impairment, like a broken arm or loss of hearing after a loud concert. We also need to consider situational challenges. Situational challenges often aren't considered legal disabilities, but we still need to solve them. An example of a situational challenge is when you're driving on a dark road late at night. Your vision is probably not as clear as it would be in the daylight, which is a situational challenge. Another example is if you're visiting a country where you don't speak the language. Your hearing is situationally limited. As UX designers, we need to keep all of these types of disabilities in mind as we design features or new products. Think about inclusive product features that increase magnification, like enlarged font, or features that help everyone understand videos, like closed captions. These features were designed to enhance the experience for people with a disability, but are used by a wide variety of people, and sometimes products that are originally adopted by the disability community can reach a wider audience. For example, when the typewriter was invented hundreds of years ago, it was an incredibly useful device for people who were blind. But most people who did not have a disability didn't see why it was necessary when they could just write with pen and ink. Later, the typewriter gained more mainstream popularity, and of course, much later, it inspired the design of personal computers. Here's the key takeaway. If we make the design of a product easier for people with disabilities, we also often make it a better experience for everyone else. Designing for accessibility isn't an obstacle, but a way to get our products to as many users as possible. We'll elaborate on how you can apply accessibility principles to your designs throughout the rest of the program. We'll explore the idea of equity-focused design in more detail later. So we've started discussing designing for accessibility, but as I've said, there's another important factor to being inclusive: equity-focused design. In this video, we'll discuss equity-focused design specifically as it affects race and gender. But keep in mind that this conversation extends beyond just race and gender to things like ability, age, and socioeconomic status. Let's explore how this applies to the field of UX. Equity-focused design means thinking through all the aspects of a design product and making sure the product is both accessible and fair to all genders, races, and abilities. Plus, the designs need to specifically consider underrepresented and excluded groups. Job applications and census forms are one area where gender and race need specific attention, because they usually involve collecting sensitive data from users. You might have already heard about the importance of having gender-neutral pronouns on these kinds of forms, but that's actually just a starting point. When designing these forms, you should also consider whether a certain question even needs to be included in the first place. Ask yourself why you're collecting this information and whether or not you really need it. For example, a job application probably doesn't need to include a question about gender identity. If a question does need to be on the form, like in a census that's collecting population data, carefully consider the wording and make sure it doesn't have a bias toward what's considered the culturally accepted norm. For example, imagine you have a form that asks respondents to select their gender. One form gives 3 choices: male, female, and other. The second form offers a wide range of choices: male, female, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and a blank field to allow for a written answer. The second form is much more likely to make everyone feel included, and it will also probably do a better job at gathering accurate data. Gender nonconforming means having a gender identity that doesn't conform to a society's gender norms. And non-binary means having a gender identity that's neither entirely male or entirely female. Another example of how equity affects gender is with public restrooms. If a business offers a men's room and a women's room, each with the same number of stalls, that would be an example of equality. However, that's not an equitable design. For one, people identifying as female often need more time, which means the bathrooms are more crowded. Plus, people who identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary are not included at all. Restrooms that are gender neutral, however, are an example of a physical space that's designed to treat everyone equitably. Everyone, no matter their gender identity, has the same opportunity to use each bathroom. Let's review a few ways this has played out in the tech industry. When voice assistants were first introduced at Google, they were trained primarily with male, native English-speaking voices. As a result, the voice assistants could easily understand and respond to male voices, but they had a hard time understanding female voices because of the higher pitch and voices of people with strong accents. When the product launched, users were extremely frustrated when the assistant could not understand them. This example highlights how testing with a diverse set of users can truly improve a product. Another important aspect of designing for equity is using inclusive images. Imagine you're designing an app and you need to create an illustration to use as a mock profile photo when a user hasn't added their own profile photo to their account yet. What does that illustration look like? As a designer, would you automatically create a picture that looks like you? Or would you be more inclusive in your representation? Representing diverse people through icons, illustrations, and photographs requires viewing everything we design through a critical lens. Avatars, like those used in account profiles, should also consider age, race, and gender, among other things. Sometimes, designers consciously include an avatar that specifically challenges the mainstream image of a user for the product to be more inclusive and equitable. Inclusive and equity-focused design are principles with endless implications, and this video is just a starting point for you to build from. As we continue through the program and start discussing user research, we'll explore biases and other factors that impact equity-focused design. Coming up, we'll consider another group of users to design for, the next billion users.
Hey there, great to have you back. User experience doesn't just focus on the experience of existing users, it also pays special attention to people who are about to become internet users. These are the people around the world getting online for the very first time. Did you know that globally there are 1 billion people right now just starting to use the internet? We call these folks the next billion users, or NBU. In this video, we'll explain why understanding the next billion users is crucial as a UX designer and how to get into the mindset of people who are new to the internet. To start, let's break down the big issues facing our next billion users and what these issues mean for us as designers. The first big issue is cost. People might not be able to afford expensive phones with big screens and lots of storage. The next issue is connectivity. Users might not have constant or unlimited access to the internet. Digital literacy is also a crucial issue. People might not be familiar with certain design patterns, calls to action, or icons that we take for granted. For example, they might not know what swipe means in relation to a touchscreen. They may not even know what a touchscreen is. This can affect their confidence and willingness to explore new technology. And the final issue to keep in mind is literacy in general. Some users aren't able to read. Others might need to switch languages depending on what they're trying to do. All right, let's check out each of these 4 challenges more closely. We'll start with cost. For example, people with fewer resources tend to buy less expensive devices with low RAM and limited storage. When a phone has low RAM, it means that the phone might load web pages more slowly and people might have problems trying to download files. To solve this problem, a company is not likely to lower its standard price. Instead, it's up to us, UX designers, with a lot of help from engineers, to figure out how to improve storage without raising the price point. The ability to temporarily disable apps is one way UX designers and engineers can make this happen. Next, let's discuss connectivity. A lot of our next billion users don't have continuous access to the internet. This might be because the data they have purchased has run out, or because their network coverage is inconsistent or sporadic. UX designers should try to find ways to make the offline experience as rich as the online experience. For example, giving users the ability to load video offline and making sure that feature and experience is well designed. Moving on to digital literacy, it's important to mention that your users might not know how to use a phone, download an app, or set up an account. Without clear guidance, they might only use the part of the app that they're already familiar with. Or worse, they might stop using the app altogether. When designing for our next billion users, keep it simple. Consider things like video tutorials to help new users understand how to install and to use an app and explore new features with greater confidence. Finally, there's the issue of literacy in general. Some users aren't able to read or type, and others might want to switch languages on their device depending on what they're trying to accomplish. For example, a user might want to read in Hindi, but type using the English keyboard. Designing a multilingual keyboard option and using universally understood icons, like an icon with a currency sign for a banking app, are just a few key ways UX designers can make it easier for the next billion users. Beyond these 4 common challenges, there is a lot more you need to consider when designing for the next billion users. For example, if you live in the United States, Canada, or Western Europe, you might have certain design biases, like leaving white space to make a document look less crowded, or designing for left-to-right languages. All right, now you have an understanding of the issues that the next billion users face. Our goal is to make every user feel like we designed the experience just for them, no matter who they are, where they live, how much they earn, or how highly they're educated. Gaining a comprehensive understanding of your user's context is an important place to start, and you're already on your way.
My name is Akhil, and I'm a UX designer at Google. I'm a part of the Next Billion Users team. We design products for users that are coming online for the first time. In my job, I make sure that people can interface seamlessly with technology. So an example of that would be, let's say you want to send your mom a text, and the phone has the capability to send a text. My job is to bridge that gap and make sure that you can tell the phone to send a text to your mom. Now, if done well, you won't be pulling your hair. The strange thing about UX design is that you won't really notice it if it's good design. You only notice it when it's bad. So there's about 1 billion users that are going to come online from countries like India, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico. These users have slightly different constraints from users that we typically design for. One of them is that a lot of these users are using low-end devices. So what does that mean? It could mean that they don't have enough storage on their phone, which means they can't install a big enough app. So that's an example of using a low storage device. Sometimes they won't have access to data, or they'll have access to flaky data. So you want to make sure that your app works offline just as well as it works online. Another example could be literacy. A lot of these users aren't literate, or they might not speak English, whereas a lot of the internet is kind of serving people who speak English. So that's another thing to think about. How do we make multilingual interfaces, or how do we make interfaces that don't rely on language at all for someone who can't read? So an interesting example of this could be the music icon. Something as simple as a music icon that we take for granted, the music note, is something that a lot of people don't understand or they don't know what it means. The reason for that, we think, is because the music icon is a very Western classical music piece of iconography. And since a lot of our users aren't exposed to that, they don't actually know what that icon means. I think when technology is built correctly, it can be a very effective tool. So for things like navigating to a place, or finding a partner, or seeking information, or learning a new skill. I don't think your access to these things should be based on how old or new you are to technology. A lot of our users that are coming online for the first time aren't often confident with technology. And so to not design for them and not help them have access to the internet and to technology, it feels like a great disservice to them.
So far, we've learned about popular user experience design frameworks and equitable design. Now, let's explain the advantages of using design tools. Later on, we'll teach you exactly how to use specific tools, and you'll begin to notice how awesome these tools can be. What are the advantages of using design tools? First, tools allow designers to prototype ideas and iterate on them. Second, tools make it easier for designers to test their prototypes. And third, design tools make it possible for multiple teams to work on the same product. UX designers use tools to create wireframes, prototypes, and more. Engineers use tools to make adjustments to the product before launch. Other teams, like marketing, use these tools to get a sneak peek at your new feature so they can create supporting content. Think of tools as a way to make designing easier and more collaborative. The two tools you'll use in this program are Figma and Adobe XD. As a learner, you'll have free access to both tools. The UX design industry evolves at a rapid pace. The tools UX designers use are constantly changing, so you'll learn new tools throughout your career. In addition, if you work at an agency or as a freelancer, you'll need to adapt the tools you use based on client requirements. The good news is, most design tools have similar features. Once you know one design tool, it's pretty easy to pick up a new tool. Keep in mind, tools are simply there to support your work. It's most important that you learn how to think like a designer. We'll go into more details about how to use tools like Figma and Adobe XD later. Soon enough, you'll be bringing your ideas to life. Welcome back. We just finished learning about the advantages of using design tools. Now, we're going to talk about why UX designers need to keep different platforms top of mind as they build user experiences. A platform is the medium that users experience your product on, such as desktop, mobile web, mobile apps, tablets, wearables, TVs, smart displays, and more. It's important to design with multiple platforms in mind because users want a product to look and feel similar no matter what platform they're using. In the past, UX designers could have focused on creating a website only for a desktop computer. But today, users might look at that same website on multiple platforms, like their mobile phone, smartwatch, and TV. UX designers now have to plan for a nearly infinite number of different devices and screen sizes. Even though UX designers need to think across platforms, it's important to focus on one platform first when you build a new product. The platform you select should be the one that best meets your end user's needs. Later, you can design for additional platforms. In addition to having a consistent user experience across platforms, it's also important to have a consistent brand identity. In this case, the brand identity refers to the visual appearance and voice of a company. For example, Google search should look and feel the same on your desktop computer and mobile phone. It's important to keep in mind that some functionalities only exist within certain platforms. Think about a voice assistant, which allows you to ask questions or control your phone with your voice. Pretty clever, right? At first, only mobile phones had voice assistants. So if the product you were designing required the use of a voice assistant, the only platform it would have worked on was a mobile phone. But fast forward to the present, and voice assistants are integrated into many other platforms, like desktop computers, TVs, and even refrigerators. Today, there are more platforms than ever, which gives us even more opportunities to design features for our users. It's definitely an exciting time to become a UX designer. Next up, we'll dive deeper into designing for web, mobile apps, and mobile web. We've started thinking about designing across platforms. Now, it's time to learn how users engage with different devices. First, we'll discuss user behavior on mobile phones and desktop computers. Then, we'll move on to design considerations when designing for mobile devices. Let's start with an overview of the current landscape. There's a big difference in the amount of time users spend on mobile phones compared to desktop computers. An average mobile session is 72 seconds, while the average desktop session is 150 seconds. More than twice as long. Why is this important? Because it tells us that people use different devices in different ways. Mobile users tend to be goal-oriented, and they're focused on completing a single task. On mobile phones, gestures like tapping and swiping help users move around the screen. Test this out for yourself. Next time you're using a mobile phone, think about your own behaviors. And remember the next billion users we discussed earlier? As those users come online, they're mostly accessing the internet from mobile devices. This means the amount of desktop web traffic compared to mobile web traffic will continue to shift. It's important for UX designers to consider mobile users' connectivity limitations, like slower processing speeds and longer load times. To be inclusive, we need to design for all types of phones, whether they cost $50 or $500. Okay, so users interact with devices in different ways. Now, let's go through the design differences we need to consider based on the devices we're designing for. First, let's talk about responsiveness. In the past, most mobile websites were a mini version of the desktop site, which often made the mobile websites difficult to use. Now, almost all websites use responsive web design. Responsive web design allows a website to change automatically, depending on the size of the device. For example, a website homepage might have multiple columns when a user experiences it on a desktop computer. With responsive web design, when a user visits the same website on a mobile phone, the multiple columns are automatically condensed into one column to better fit the smaller screen. All the content is still there, and the usability is way better. Internet browsing on desktop computers has been around for longer than on mobile devices. But since mobile device usage has been booming, designers have had to start focusing on designing for mobile. So let's think about a few best practices when designing for mobile user experiences. First, call to action buttons should be placed front and center, allowing the user to easily complete the desired task, like joining an email list or adding an item to their shopping cart. Second, navigation menus should be short and simple. We want to simplify the user experience on mobile, so menu options should only highlight the core functions of the product. Third, use gestures that users already do, like tapping and swiping. Gestures should be intuitive and familiar to users. Fourth, design for both directions a phone might be held. We need to consider the vertical portrait view of a mobile phone and the horizontal landscape view. We want users to have an effective experience, no matter how they hold their phone. And fifth, reduce visual clutter. Mobile phones have smaller screen sizes, so it's important to keep the visual experience simple. Whew, that was a lot of new information to take in. Remember this main takeaway. Users behave differently depending on their device. UX designers help make that transition happen as seamlessly as possible. It's a big responsibility, but a lot of fun too. Up next, Shabi will be back to talk to you about designing responsively to meet users' needs.
Hi, nice to see you again. Earlier, we discussed the concept of accessibility. Now, we'll explore the various assistive technologies that can empower anyone with a disability. The term assistive technology, or AT for short, is used to describe any products, equipment, and systems that enhance learning, working, and daily living for people with disabilities. In this video, we'll examine several kinds of assistive technologies, including color modification, voice control, screen readers, and alternative text. Then we'll explore a few design considerations to keep in mind when designing for accessibility. Let's get started. First, it's important to call out that there are lots of people who don't identify as having a disability, but still use assistive technologies. That's because ATs make our lives easier and help provide a better user experience. When we think of assistive technology, we might think of computers, tablets, and smartphones. But AT covers a wide range of devices, like prosthetics, pointing devices, electric wheelchairs, power lifts, eye gaze and head trackers, and a whole lot more. AT can also encompass something as low-tech as a pencil holder. Not only does a pencil holder keep your pencil from rolling away, it also makes pencils easier to grip, which can be essential for people with certain motor disabilities. Understanding how people with disabilities use your product is a critical part of the UX design process. First up, let's examine color modification. Color modification, like high contrast mode or dark mode on a device, increases the contrast of colors on a screen. Black text on a white background or white text on a dark background are both examples of high contrast. High contrast makes the interface easier to see for people with low vision. Color modification also helps anyone who might experience eye strain when viewing screens in the dark or midday when the sun is creating an intense glare. Lots of people use it just because it's easier on the eyes. Next, let's go through voice control and switch devices. Both of these help people with limited dexterity and can serve as an alternative to a keyboard or mouse. Voice control allows users to navigate and interact with the buttons and screens on their devices using only their voice. Lots of devices have settings with this feature. A switch is an assistive technology device that replaces the need to use a computer keyboard or a mouse. Switch devices can allow users to control technology like a computer or smartphone. There are a lot of different kinds of switch devices, but they all help people with limited motor ability use technology more easily. Next up, screen readers. Screen readers are one of the most common assistive technologies for people with limited vision. The software works on mobile and web devices and reads out loud any on-screen text. Screen readers also read any interactive elements, like buttons, along with non-visible text, like the button names, and any alternative text for images. Alternative text, or alt text, helps translate a visual user interface into a text-based user interface. It essentially uses words to describe any meaningful image for someone who isn't able to see the image. Alt text is also super helpful for those with low bandwidth connections too. If your device is unable to maintain a connection to the internet, it may struggle to load a big file or image. Alt text is useful for context when an image fails to load. As I said before, you don't need to have a disability to benefit from assistive technology. Speech-to-text is a great example. With speech-to-text, a user composes text by speaking into their phone or computer. The voice recording is automatically converted into text. A lot of people find it much easier to text by talking to their device because it offers a hands-free experience and reduces the amount of mental energy needed to type. Let me show you. Here I am using the speech-to-text feature on my mobile device. Pretty cool, huh? There are tons of design considerations to take into account in order to meet the needs of all users. Later, when we build wireframes, we'll go through exactly how to incorporate accessibility into your designs. All right, that's it for now. You've learned the common UX terms and frameworks, what user-centered design means, the tools that UX designers use, and how UX designers work across platforms. Plus, you've gained a deeper understanding of inclusive design and equity-focused design. You practice thinking like a designer, which is a core skill you'll continue to build on throughout this program.
My name is Elise, and I'm the Accessibility and Inclusion Lead for Corporate Engineering. The work we do touches most of Google's products, and that we are creating the internal stuff that helps ensure the products that we create eventually are accessible and inclusive. I love teaching teams that there's value in difference, in the difference that we find within human beings. Difference helps us think creatively and helps us see gaps in our products. Often when we look into those gaps and the insights that we gain from looking at people who experience the world differently, we build better products that are more adaptable, that are longer lasting, and more innovative. When we talk about accessibility, we are talking about how to make a product accessible by people with different abilities. But when we talk about inclusive design, what we're doing is we're looking to difference, to their different experiences and their needs because of their different capabilities, and gathering these insights and applying it in a way that it will benefit everyone, whether they have a disability or not. If we go back in terms of how we used to do websites, they used to be very text heavy. They used to be more like a book. And people with disabilities for years had been advocating for larger text and less content, much more like smaller chunks of text. And when we started to design for accessibility, we created sites that were much more easily consumed. So accessibility is important to me personally because I have a hearing loss, a severe hearing loss. I began losing my hearing at 10, and it progressed over 5 years until it reached the profound range. So if you were to cover your mouth and say 100 words, and I guess that every single one, I might get one right. As someone with a hearing loss, I'm constantly struggling with situations where I need to communicate with others. I use assistive technology in a lot of different ways. Captioning is the most valuable thing for me. I also use things such as Google's Live Transcribe, which helps in real-time conversations with people. I use Google Meet's closed captions to help me understand meetings that I have with my colleagues. There's also something called InnoCaption, which captions telephone calls using a live transcriber. That completely changed my world because before that was created, I couldn't use telephone. And that was something that really blocked my capabilities as in the work setting. The first piece of advice is to consider edge cases or users with difference in all of your product development processes. This is where you're going to gain some really valuable insight. It should be a normal part of your development process. It shouldn't be an add-on. It should be considered from the beginning. But I think it's extremely important to diversify your own network. Start getting to know people who are different from you. Start learning from them. Ask them what their experiences are like with different technology as they go about their world. Learning these unique experiences is what's going to make you see opportunities for great design in your products.
Hey, welcome back. So far, we've covered common terms, frameworks, and tools that entry-level UX designers should know. We've also talked about the importance of user-centered design and why UX designers should focus on equity in the design process. Let's start with a little exercise. Take a look around the room you're in right now. Notice the shape of your table and the ergonomics of your chair. What about the device you're using to play this video on right now? All that stuff and almost everything else around you started off as a design problem or design challenge. So, how does something go from a design challenge to an actual user-centered product? One way is through design sprints. A design sprint is a time-bound process with 5 phases, typically spread out over 5 full 8-hour days. The goal of design sprints is to solve a critical design challenge through designing, prototyping, and testing ideas with users. At Google, we use design sprints to answer questions, define product directions, figure out cross-team strategies, and even build team culture. For example, I was recently a part of a design sprint for Google's transparency report. The goal was to better understand how our users experience the reports. We also discussed the website's goals, values, and future vision. Design sprints generally include 5 phases: understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. We'll come back to these phases and investigate each one later. So, what makes a design sprint so useful? For one, design sprints save time. With a sprint, your team can cut the decision-making process down from several months to a single week. Sprints also create an effective path to bring a product to market. Sprints prioritize the user, putting their needs front and center. And sprints allow you to fast forward into the future to test your product and get customer reactions before making any expensive decisions. Running a design sprint is like using a superpower. With all these benefits, you'd think every product team would want to run design sprints. But that's not always the case. Before launching into a design sprint, you need to review your design challenge and ask yourself these key questions. Are there many potential solutions to your design challenge? Does the design challenge require people from cross-functional teams to weigh in? Is the design challenge's scope wide enough for a sprint? If you answered yes to any one of these questions, a design sprint might be the right move. All right, so you've got the basic idea behind design sprints down. Now you know what a design sprint is, the benefits of running a design sprint, and how to identify when to use a design sprint. Next, let's check out each phase of the design sprint process. Hi again. Let's think back to those 5 design sprint phases we introduced earlier. Understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. Now, we're going to go beyond introductions and really get to know each phase. A traditional design sprint lasts 5 days, with each phase taking up to 1 full day. The whole process is super hands-on. Creative collaboration is at the core of every phase. Let's explore how a team might conduct a design sprint. Imagine you're a UX designer for a company called Cycling Enthusiasts. Your latest app lets cyclists track their distance ridden and calories burned. Sadly, the app's sales have started slumping. Kind of like how your energy would start slumping if you had actually taken a long bike ride today. So, how can a design sprint solve this problem? Let's find out. The understand phase sets your sprint on the right track and helps your team get a clear picture of the design challenge. Your team takes time to learn from experts and engage in creative discussions with a lot of different people from other departments and industries. These conversations help you more clearly understand the design challenge. But what's the first rule of UX design? The user comes first. This means everything your team does during the sprint should focus on the user. So now your team understands the design challenge. For our imaginary sprint, let's say sales are slumping because the app doesn't offer bicyclists anything new. Your team arrives for phase 2 of the design sprint, pumped full of inspiration and ready to ideate some solutions. To get the creative juices flowing, you start this phase by coming up with ideas and building off of them to create solutions. Once you've got the team thinking, each participant takes time to sketch and present their ideas. Don't worry about your drawing skills here. The idea is what matters. On top of all the ideating that happens in phase 2, you also need to start planning for user testing, which happens in phase 5 of the sprint. During user testing, you'll have a diverse group of people test your product and provide feedback. To be able to do this, you need to start recruiting users that fit your target profile now, so the sprint stays on schedule. By the time you reach phase 3, you have a lot of potential solutions for your design challenge. Now it's time to decide which solutions you want to build. Together, your cycling app team discusses each possible solution and eventually decides on the one solution that is most likely to excite users and increase sales. For example, the solution might be a feature that uses the cyclist's location to create customized routes that meet their fitness goals. Sounds pretty cool, right? Finally, you'll wrap up the day by creating a step-by-step blueprint for your prototype. Next, phase 4, prototype time. You're now ready to build the first version of your new app feature. At the end of this phase, you don't need a finished product, just something realistic enough to test with users. By focusing only on what the user experiences on their screen, your team creates a working prototype of the new customized routes feature. Way to go! During this phase, you also finish prepping for user testing by confirming the test schedule, finalizing interview questions, and making sure your prototype is good to go. All right, it's been a busy week, but you did it. You reached the final phase, testing. Now it's time to put your prototype in front of users. As users test your prototype, you observe how they react and then interview them about their experiences. Your team gains critical insight about changes that need to be made before you launch the new feature. To recap, the 5 phases of design sprints are: understand the scope of the design challenge, ideate possible solutions, decide on the most viable solution, create a workable prototype, and finally, test that prototype with actual users. Congrats! You made it to the end of the sprint. Now your team knows exactly what to adjust before launching the new cycling app feature. Promotions for all! Design sprints are a big part of the UX design world, so you'll probably participate in a lot of them, and even lead a few someday. Coming up, we'll explain why design sprints are beneficial to UX designers. Ready to learn even more about design sprints? Me too. From tech to finance to retail, future-forward companies in all kinds of different industries use design sprints to solve complex problems. In other words, sprints are pretty much a game changer. But what makes design sprints beneficial? And why are they so darn popular? Here's what a few seasoned UX designers have pointed out. First, in design sprints, it's all about the user. Sprint participants make sure the design challenge is always focused on the user and their needs. After all, it's the users who ultimately decide if your product is successful, right? Second, sprints value every person in the room, from the office intern to the senior stakeholder. Including people from lots of disciplines and experience levels is a key part of the process. Why? Because considering all angles of the problem and the solution means the best ideas will rise to the top. Next, sprints give the core team time to focus solely on the design challenge. Think about it. 5 workdays devoted entirely to distraction-less, gadget-less creative collaboration. Now, that's a recipe for some serious problem solving. Also, sprints lower the risk of an unsuccessful market debut because the team gets feedback from real users and can make critical adjustments before the product launches. And finally, sprints are versatile because they can be scheduled at any point during your project. When a challenge arises, you've always got the design sprint option in your back pocket. So, are you sold on the benefits of a design sprint yet? Awesome. Next, let's focus on how to plan an effective one. Hey, nice to see you again. As an entry-level UX designer, you probably won't be expected to lead a design sprint, but it's still helpful to know what it takes to plan a successful one. Let's check out some of the basic ideas. First up, user research. If you're lucky enough to have a dedicated researcher on your team, they can own this step. If not, well, you might be taking it on yourself. User research is always the first step in any sprint planning process. Your research should focus on the user problems you're trying to solve during the sprint. You don't have to detail out a specific problem right away, but getting a rough idea of what your sprint will focus on will help you decide which research methods make the most sense. We'll discuss different research methods in more detail later. Next, it's time to call in the experts. If you're planning the sprint, it's up to you to schedule short talks with colleagues or industry experts. You'll listen to these info-packed talks during the understand phase of the sprint. A good talk helps clarify the problem your sprint is trying to solve. Keep in mind, the more experts you bring in, the more schedules you have to accommodate. So start planning early. We promise it'll be worth it. Step 3, find the right space. Sounds a little obvious, right? But trust me, booking the right room can make all the difference. It's important to ensure that the space allows all employees equal opportunities to perform their job. Let's talk about a few things you should look for. Whiteboards to capture your ideas or hang sticky notes, acoustics so participants can hear each other easily, accommodations for anyone who needs them, and comfortable furniture that you can move around easily. You're going to be spending a lot of time in this room, so get cozy. Once you've found the right space, it's time to gather supplies. If you're planning the design sprint, it's your job to make sure everyone has what they need to participate, kind of like a teacher handing out classroom supplies. Some essentials include markers, sticky notes, and a lot of snacks and water. On to step 5, establish the rules of the sprint. If you want this to be a gadgetless, distraction-free zone, now's the time to say so. Figuring out the ground rules in advance sets the tone for the sprint, gets everyone on the same page, and helps your team stay focused. So you've done your research, called in the experts, found the right space, gathered supplies, and established your sprint rules. What's next? Step 6 is planning introductions. This can be pretty important since sprints involve cross-functional teams that may have never met before. We all know icebreakers can be a little cheesy, but they're still a great way to help your team get comfortable with each other. Plus, choosing icebreakers that are relevant to your sprint can motivate your team and put them in the right mindset. Here's an idea for an icebreaker. Ask everyone to talk about a time they call customer service to complain. This puts the team in the shoes of a user, exactly where you want them to be when solving UX design challenges. All right, we made it to the final step, post-sprint planning. That means thinking about what will happen after the sprint wraps up, like how your team might use what you've learned to achieve other goals. To do this, you need documentation. Make sure you enlist a few people to help document the design sprint by taking pictures, collecting sticky notes, and jotting down ideas. Okay, let's recap the sprint planning basics. To prepare for a design sprint, you'll need to conduct user research, schedule talks with experts, find the right space, gather supplies, establish ground rules, break the ice with your team, and plan out post-sprint action items. Sound about right? Awesome. Let's keep going. Up next, we'll walk through a design sprint brief. Hi again. So we've covered the basics of sprint planning. Now let's build a 5-day design sprint brief. The sprint brief is a document that you'll share with all your attendees to help them prepare for the sprint. So let's check out the things that make up a design sprint brief. Start with the Design Sprint Challenge. This introduces your team to the sprint objectives. Think back to the cycling app from earlier. If you created a brief for that sprint, the design challenge might be build exciting new features for the cycling app in time for relaunch later in the year. Next, you need to identify the key deliverables, meaning what your team actually wants to create by the end of the sprint. So for the cycling app, you might say that we want to have a complete prototype that includes the feature update. Then it's on to logistics. First, everyone participating in the sprint needs to know where the sprint will happen and when it will be held. You also want to list who's attending and the name of the sprint master. Usually, the sprint master is the person who sends out the brief. But that's not always the case. If you want to designate a sprint master, you should do it before you send the brief. Next, add approvers. Got some higher-ups that need to sign off on the product before launch? This is the place to note it. If your cycling app needs the official approval of Miss Cycling Enthusiast CEO before launching, the sprint brief should mention it. Your sprint brief should also include a list of resources. For short-term sprints, there's probably a team already assigned to this project. For long-term sprints, you may need to create a plan to secure additional resources. For example, with the cycling app, you might need to assign resources from engineering to take on the work needed to launch the new feature. Next, we have the project overview, where you should explain the current state of the project, call out roadblocks that stand in your way, state early wins if you have any, and outline the estimated launch plan. Finally, we wrap it all up with the sprint schedule, an hour-by-hour schedule of the 5-day sprint, including break times. This lets people know what to expect and gives them time to prep, so you can keep things moving along during the sprint. And you're done. You've planned your design sprint and created your brief. The only thing left to do now is to put the sprint in motion. If you're still a little confused about what goes in the design brief, you'll find some great examples in the readings. Okay, next up, we'll learn more about the role of an entry-level UX designer in the sprint process. Welcome back. Let's do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. We've defined the design sprint, identified the 5 phases, and explored what goes into planning a successful sprint. Now, you're probably thinking, that's great, but where does a newbie UX designer like me fit into all of this? As an entry-level UX designer, you won't be running the show, but you'll play an important role, contributing to every phase of the sprint. Let's check out what your sprint week might look like. When you get to the sprint space, you'll find everything you need to do your work. You'll have office supplies, a bottle of water, and maybe some snacks. The sprint master will welcome everyone and lay out some ground rules. For example, you might have to give up your phone and keep your laptop closed until the end of each day. There might also be a team icebreaker, like the example mentioned earlier. And then you'll get down to it. The first day is the understand phase, where you'll get a clear picture of the design challenge. There will be plenty of short talks by experts that are designed to inspire you, so make note of any thoughts you have. Phase 2 is the ideate phase. The sprint master will guide the team through brainstorming activities to spark creativity and generate tons of possible solutions to the design challenge. Your main focus is coming up with ideas and putting them out there. Welcome to Phase 3, the decide phase. Congratulations, you're halfway through the sprint. Your team will decide on the solution with the greatest chance of success. As a newbie UX designer, you'll get involved in every stage of the decision-making process. When potential solutions fight it out, you'll vote for the one that has the most potential. As you might remember, at this point, you also need to start planning ahead for testing, or Phase 5 of the sprint. As an entry-level UX designer, you might help by scheduling testers, creating survey and interview questions, and gathering necessary equipment. Phase 4 is all about creating a prototype of your product. As an entry-level UX designer, you'll be actively involved in creating a solid prototype for users to try out. You'll ask questions, offer ideas, and review the completed prototype. You might also confirm the test users for Phase 5. We've made it. It's test day. The test phase is the final phase of the process, where you put your prototype to the test. As a newbie designer, you might be asked to collect user feedback by observing and interviewing users. This feedback helps the team know what to revise before bringing the product to market. And that's it. You've learned all about an entry-level UX designer's role in the design sprint process. As you reach the design sprint process finish line, expect to feel like you just completed an actual sprint at a track meet. A successful sprint will leave you tired but energized, chock full of new ideas, with a fire in your belly to get to work. I still remember the first sprint I was a part of. I came up with some cool ideas, but also a lot of bad ones. No worries if this happens to you as well. This is why validating your ideas with users is baked into the design sprint process. You'll have ideas, and so will the rest of your team, meaning it doesn't rely solely on you. It's a team effort, and by the end of the process, you'll have a better sense of whether your idea is working or not before implementing it. Coming up, we'll talk about retrospectives and why it's important.
My name is Jason, and I am an interaction designer at Google. The goal of a design sprint is to take really complex problems and come together with other people on your team, like product managers, engineers, and marketing, and try to solve that problem together. And you do it over the course of a week. And you do multiple design activities, like from wireframing and prototyping, and then at the end of the week, test with users. And it's a really good way to get quick feedback and test those initial hypotheses. And that's why it's so important to bring people with multiple perspectives together. You may bring this fresh new perspective, and you may have somebody else with historical knowledge on this project. But we also are bringing people together from product management and marketing to bring all of these unique perspectives. And I think that this just proves that sprints at their core are about inclusivity. We really want to bring people together with multiple perspectives to surface these multitude of ideas. It's always important to understand who your participants are and make sure that this overall experience is thoughtful. You put everyone's needs first. And I think that it's, in a way, a condensed version of your user experience job, where right now, when you're designing a sprint, that these participants are your users. And it's important to understand their needs and put them first when designing a sprint.
Here's some exciting news. You now know how to prepare for and execute a design sprint. There's just one last thing to do, the sprint retrospective. So, let's check out what a sprint retrospective is, how it's conducted, and why it's important. We've all experienced seeing someone make the same mistake over and over again. Chances are, we've sometimes even been that person. What if there was a way to stop making mistakes for good? Well, that's exactly what retrospectives do. The retrospective is a collaborative critique of the team's design sprint. We usually do retrospective meetings immediately following the sprint so that everyone's thoughts are fresh. Retrospective meetings don't have any particular agenda. The goal is to make sure everyone who took part in the sprint has a chance to give feedback. The two key questions we aim to answer in the meeting are, what went well, and what can be improved? The person who led the sprint will guide the conversation, and someone will take notes so that the team can use the feedback to make the next sprint even more productive. Retrospectives are super useful. They can help you to work better as a team, improve how you communicate with clients, and even point out areas where you can grow as an individual. Retrospectives are all about empowering, not shaming. If something didn't go well, this is your chance to make sure you have the resources and the tools to do better next time. One of the most effective retrospectives I took part in was one where people actually felt comfortable contributing, and we focused on continuous improvement. Speaking of retrospectives, let's recap what we learned. We now know what a design sprint is, what's involved in each design sprint phase, and how to plan a design sprint. We highlighted where you, as an entry-level UX designer, fit into the design sprint process. And we learned about the importance of sprint retrospectives. Next up, we'll focus on how to build a professional presence. But first, we've got your next assessment. You've got this. And if you need any refreshers, you can always review. Good luck. Hey, welcome back. You now know all about design sprints and how you fit in as an entry-level UX designer. Next, you'll learn what a portfolio is and why UX designers use them, how to choose a website builder for your portfolio and start to create your website, how to demonstrate your unique value and personal brand through the story you tell, how to describe your work concisely and articulately, and how to create a consistent online presence. And finally, how to network with others and find a UX design mentor.
I'm Lisa. I'm a visual designer at Google. A visual designer at Google is a user experience designer that really focuses in on the creative expression of a user experience. So when I decided I wanted to get into user experience design, I had no experience. I didn't have a real first job yet. I had a very traditional graphic design and branding portfolio, and I had new projects from doing an internship for 9 months that I had created. But then I decided that I wanted to go into UX, and I needed to recreate that portfolio, having no work experience in UX, to still be a user experience portfolio. When I was just applying to user experience jobs, I knew I wanted to be a visual designer. So even though at heart I was still unsure if I wanted to call myself that, I knew it was important to identify that myself like that strategically in the portfolio. So I said that I was a visual designer. The actual portfolio in itself, I had to completely redo the layout. I don't need to start from scratch. I don't need to panic. Everything is there. I just need to reroute the way that I am storytelling and bringing some of these elements to life, so it does feel more like a user experience project. So I really focused in on the storytelling and the thinking like a user experience designer. It was interesting because when I got to Google, I felt, okay, I can think like this. I just now need to catch up on the day-to-day, the tools, the software, the things that most people kind of know going in, that somehow I sort of faked it till I made it. And the funny part about that is my team didn't seem to care that I didn't know any of that. They were just happy that I was curious, that I was hungry to learn, that I was anxious to get started on a project. What really defined how I got into the job was a curiosity to learn and to grow and to project myself as an ambitious visual designer.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the program, our goal is for you to learn the skills you need to get a job as an entry-level UX designer. But how do you demonstrate those skills during the job application process? That's where portfolios come in. In this video, you'll learn what a portfolio is and why UX designers use them. A portfolio is a collection of work that you've created that shows your skills in a certain area, like painting, photography, or UX design. UX design is a creative field, so it's important to show hiring managers examples of your work and demonstrate the skills you can bring to the job. In the past, portfolios were usually a physical collection of work, like a giant briefcase full of drawings. But in today's world, it's more likely that your portfolio will be on a website, which is much easier to update and share. Next, you'll build your own website to showcase your future portfolio. You don't need to know how to write code or have any work to include yet. As you build your own projects throughout this program, you'll add them to this new portfolio. Sound fun? It is. Creating a showcase of your work and skills is a great way to start feeling like a part of the UX design community. Keep in mind that the design of the website itself is also important. Having a well-designed website is another way to demonstrate that you understand the principles of UX design. You wouldn't want your website to have a bad user experience when you're applying for a job in UX. As you design the website, you want your portfolio to tell a story and grab the user's attention. This will help you stand out. After all, the user might be a recruiter or a client interested in offering you a job. Next up, you'll meet entry-level UX designers, explore real-world portfolios, and learn how those portfolios help lead to jobs in UX design. Ready? Let's get started. Hey there! Now that you know why you need a portfolio, let's find out how to make one. Coming up, we'll explain how to build a personalized online portfolio, and we'll help you choose the website builder that works best for you. Building a website might seem intimidating, but there are a lot of tools to help you. Most website builders are simple to use and don't require any coding or technical knowledge. Plus, they have a support team on staff to help. Website builders often have tutorials to help you figure out what layout to use and how to add text, sound, and images. These user-friendly website builders feature WYSIWYG editors. WYSIWYG stands for What You See is What You Get. In other words, you can type and make your text bold or italics as you would in a word processing program like Google Docs and Microsoft Word. All this might seem obvious, but web-based WYSIWYG editors have only been around for 10 years or so. Before website builders were widely available, you had to create everything in HTML and CSS, which are the coding languages used to build the internet. Fortunately, things are a lot simpler now, so you don't need to know any code to build an impressive portfolio. If you do know how to code, or if you'd like the challenge and flexibility that you get with coding, awesome. You can choose to build a website from scratch instead of using a website builder. Just be sure to put your UX design work front and center and prioritize the UX of the site. Remember, recruiters and employers want to know about your UX design work, not how good you are at coding. Now let's check out some common website builders used by UX designers to build portfolios. There are lots of options for website builders, but in this video, we'll focus on 3 of the most popular: Wix, Squarespace, and Webflow. For this program, you can choose any of the 3. They all have benefits and drawbacks, so choose the website builder that works best for you. Don't worry that your portfolio might look similar to your classmates. There are a variety of templates to choose from on each website builder. You'll personalize your template to convey your unique style, communicate the value you bring to the UX design industry, and showcase your designs. Now, we'll quickly review each website builder, then you can use the links in the readings to learn more and decide which website builder you'd like to use. The reading also has step-by-step instructions on how to set up your website. Wix is easy to use and a favorite with folks in all kinds of creative industries. There are plenty of templates, and even some templates specifically for portfolios. Templates mean that you don't have to start from a blank slate, which makes it easy to achieve impressive results in no time. Squarespace is also popular, especially with visual designers. Squarespace is best known for its blog function, but it also has beautiful website themes. There are a bunch of templates to choose from, and it's flexible to allow for personalization. If you're new to website building, it's definitely a great choice. Finally, Webflow is a well-known option among UX designers for its on-trend styles and layouts and high level of customization. You do need some knowledge of coding though. So if you'd like to practice your coding skills, Webflow might be a good choice for you. Each of these website builders offer their own add-ons that you can purchase. One option is a domain, or the address of your website. It's better to have your own domain name for personal branding. You'll personalize your template to convey your own unique style, communicate the value you bring to the UX design industry, and showcase your designs. Okay, now you know why website builders are helpful tools for building your UX design portfolio. Take some time to check out each tool so you fully understand the options available. Then pick the one you want to use based on your needs and your career interests. Next, we'll cover the best practices and essential features of a UX designer's portfolio. See you then. Congrats on setting up your website. Now that you've got that first step out of the way, you can start personalizing the website. In this video, we'll share best practices and highlight some essential features of UX design portfolios. Keep in mind, there is no right way to build your portfolio. Every designer, recruiter, and client has a different idea about what should be featured in a portfolio. It's most important to find a way to make yourself stand out from the other designers. You'll also want to express yourself in a way that fits your job interests. For example, if you're interested in specializing in interaction, visual, or motion design, your portfolio should showcase that type of work. Ready? Let's get started. Pro tip number 1, establish your personal brand. Your personal brand is the way in which your personality, unique skills, and values as a designer intersect with your public persona. We'll learn more about branding later, but the main thing to know is that your personal brand is the first impression you make. Your personal brand should clearly demonstrate who you are and what makes you interesting. Pro tip number 2, tell a story. Your website could easily turn into a list of links and photos, but to engage your audience, you need to tell a story about your design process with a beginning, middle, and end. This might mean that you start with an introduction of the design problem. Then in the middle, show the process you followed to complete the designs, like user research, sketches, and wireframes. Then end with an image of the polished design and an endorsement from your client or another person whose opinion you value. Pro tip number 3, be concise. Use minimal text to describe your work and highlight the key insights that help inform your decisions. Let your work speak for itself. If you need to explain your work in more detail, add links to other pages or PDFs. Pro tip number 4, keep your navigation simple and intuitive. The navigation is the way users get from page to page on a website. Users should be able to reach the home page from any part of your site, and your navigation should lead them from one project to the next. It should also be easy for users to navigate to the contact page if they want to get in touch with you. Your contact page should include your email address, a copy of your resume, and links to your professional social media accounts. Pro tip number 5, go beyond the template. Although a website builder's pre-designed layouts make it easy to get started, you need to go a step further. Customize your website to align with your brand and the story you want to tell. You should demonstrate your design skills and provide a good user experience. For example, remove the text that comes preloaded in the template and replace it with your own content. Also, register your own domain name so that your website's address doesn't contain the name of the website builder. You can buy a domain directly through website builders or through a third-party service. Pro tip number 6, include a diversity of projects. You should have 3 to 6 projects in your portfolio that demonstrate the range of your skills. At the end of this program, you'll have created at least 3 projects, so you'll be well on your way. Make sure each project shows a different facet of your design talents. Pro tip number 7, feature case studies. A case study leads the user through your design process from the beginning to the end. Your portfolio should feature case studies, not just mock-ups of design ideas. A case study answers these questions. What was the problem you were trying to solve? What process did you follow? Where did you succeed or fail? What insights inform your design decisions along the way? And what was the ultimate solution? And why do you feel that solution was the best? When describing case studies, you might want to include things like the project's name and duration, your role on the design team, including your personal contributions to the project, the project's goal, the research that was conducted, the intended audience, any sketches or wireframes, user testing results, the final design, and a conclusion about what you learned in the process. You'll learn more about each of these elements as you continue through the program. One more thing to keep in mind about case studies: be careful not to share any proprietary information or break a non-disclosure agreement if you have one. A non-disclosure agreement is a contract an employee might sign when working with a business in which they agree not to share sensitive information, like designs in the process of being developed. Pro tip number 8, make sure your website is responsive. Remember that responsive means the on-screen appearance of the website adjusts based on the user's device. So whether someone looks at your website on the desktop computer or mobile phone, they'll have a good experience. And finally, pro tip number 9, test your website. It's important to test your website on different devices to make sure it functions properly. For example, you might need to move buttons around or adjust images to fit on the mobile version of your site. You don't want to lose a recruiter's interest because they decided to pull up your website on their phone instead of their computer and found the text misaligned. Like we mentioned earlier, having a portfolio with a great user experience will impress potential employers. All right, that's it. It's a lot of work to build a design portfolio that tells your story and connects with users. That's why we're starting now. If you add new pieces to your portfolio as you build them, you'll be in much better shape when it's time to apply for jobs. To stay on track, schedule time to work on your portfolio every week. We'll remind you to add to your website as you complete projects and learn new skills. Coming up, we'll explore personal branding and why it matters so you can get to work personalizing your portfolio. Let's get to it. Hi again. We've established that your personal brand is the way in which your personality, unique skills, and values as a designer intersect with your public persona. Your personal brand is an essential way to demonstrate your value as a designer and should be a central focus when building your portfolio. But why do personal brands matter? Let's investigate. When you think of the word brand, well-known businesses come to mind. How do you think about a company when you hear their name? What's your perception of McDonald's as a brand? Or Starbucks? What about Apple? All of these are major brands with very different messages about their business, products, and the value they offer consumers. They might even make you feel a certain way when you think about them, like hungry or excited. But branding isn't just for big companies. People think about their brands too. For example, celebrities choose their work and philanthropies they support based on the personal brand they want to convey. You can do the same thing as a UX designer. You want to build a personal brand that showcases the type of work you want to do. Your personal brand is your primary source of marketing, which is why it's so important to be your authentic self. So how do you figure out what your personal brand should be? You can start by asking yourself a few questions. What am I naturally good at? What have I learned to do well? What do I enjoy? What do I value? How do other people describe me and my talents? And what do I want people to recognize me for? If you're already answering those questions in your mind, fantastic. Later, you'll complete a worksheet that will help you answer these questions. Now let's explore why branding is important. When you're working as a UX designer or in any other creative role, your personal brand is a way for you to stand out from the crowd. Otherwise, it's easy to get lost in a sea of job applicants. You want recruiters to understand who you are, your passions, and your strengths right away. Having a strong personal brand can also help match you with companies that share your values. When a company looks for a designer, it's helpful for them to understand your personal brand before they hire you. Think about how you might shop at a certain store based on their branding. For example, what brand comes to mind when you hear the words inexpensive or expensive? What about healthy or comfort food? And how about celebrities? Who would you describe as a social activist or generous or humble? Ideally, you want the way you think about yourself and the way others describe you to be similar. When you think about your personal brand, it's useful to come up with a list of your talents and values. When doing a personal branding exercise, you might realize that your self-perception and public perceptions are different. That's perfectly normal, but it's not ideal when you're trying to project a particular brand. So you might want to think about how you can bring your self-perception and public perception closer together. In addition, your brand should be consistent everywhere you have a presence online. That includes your social media accounts, your profiles on UX design communities, your resume, and your business cards. If figuring out how to communicate your personal brand in writing makes you nervous, we've got your back. Later, we'll go through best practices to describe your work in writing. Keep up the awesome work. Great work on your portfolio so far. You've accomplished so much already, like setting up your website and learning best practices for writing. In this video, we'll explain how to build a cohesive and consistent presence online. We covered how to apply your personal brand to your portfolio in an earlier video. Your personal brand should come across in your portfolio, on social media, in online UX design communities, and on job search websites. You'll also want to keep handy the worksheets you completed about your personal brand, so you can reference them in the next few videos. So what does it mean to build your professional presence online? Start with your personal statement, which was part of the branding worksheet you completed. A personal statement is a 1 or 2 sentence phrase that describes what you do and what you stand for. Think of a personal statement like your own slogan or tagline. You want your personal statement to highlight what makes your work unique. The best personal statements are memorable and catchy. Consider including a version of your personal statement on the About Me page of your portfolio website. It's helpful to repeat words that you use to describe yourself in order to reinforce the key elements of your brand. You might also want to include your personal statement on your social media profiles or your resume. Keep in mind, whatever your personal statement communicates should also be reflected in your work. For example, if you describe yourself as organized, that should be evident in your designs. Or if you're passionate about working in virtual reality, you should include a design for a virtual reality experience. Even if it's not your own design, you can describe why it's inspiring to you. In addition, you probably know that you should be thoughtful about posting pictures of yourself on the internet. Since we're trying to build a cohesive professional presence online, your photos should be consistent across platforms, like your portfolio and LinkedIn profile. For example, using the same photo of yourself everywhere can help recruiters identify you across platforms. And when selecting a photo of yourself to use, you should express your unique style, culture, and interests. Finally, make sure your color scheme, logo, font, and other design elements are consistent across platforms. This includes websites like your portfolio and social media accounts, as well as physical products like your business cards. Of course, there's only so much customization you can do on some of these social media sites, but try to keep the look and feel as consistent as possible whenever you can. Keep in mind that your online presence and personal brand are important in landing a job and growing your career. It's also a chance for you to be creative, so have fun with it. Next, we'll explore how personal branding is useful when creating profiles on social media sites and online communities for UX designers. See you soon. Welcome back. Now that you've defined your personal brand and built your own website, it's time to think about professional networking on social media. In this video, we'll discuss how you can use social media as a tool to connect with recruiters, potential employers, and your peers in the UX design community. There's a good chance you already have a profile on at least one social media site, like Facebook or Instagram, that you use to connect with friends and family. Social media can be a great way to connect with potential employers, learn about new concepts and ideas, and network with other UX designers. Right now, let's focus on 2 of the most popular social media sites for UX designers, LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn is a professional networking site where you can connect with people you know, learn more about companies, read about interesting ideas, and post your own content. LinkedIn is a great place to host your resume and get noticed by recruiters. It's one of the top websites recruiters use to find job candidates. In fact, many of my job opportunities over the years started with networking and making connections through LinkedIn. So how do you set up a profile on LinkedIn? First, you go to the LinkedIn homepage and create an account. Then create your profile. Be sure to list your job history or other professional experiences, along with descriptions of your role at each organization. Once your profile is filled out, you're ready to connect with people. It's best to connect with people you actually know, especially people you've worked with. You might also want to connect with former teachers, coaches, classmates, or family members. You can add a connection by clicking the Connect button. Personalize your connection request with a short message that reminds the person how you know each other. Once they accept, you'll get a confirmation saying you're connected. You should also use LinkedIn to connect with recruiters in the UX design industry. Add a note to your connection request that you're looking to learn more about the company and their job openings. You can also consider connecting with employees at the company you'd like to work for. Browse the LinkedIn profiles of people associated with the company. Check out if you know anyone who currently works at the company or has worked there in the past. If so, don't be afraid to send them a personalized message. LinkedIn will also tell you if you have friends of friends who work at the company. If this happens, reach out to your friend to see if they're willing to make an introduction to their friend who works at the company. If you don't have connections to anyone at the company, send a personalized message to someone at the company whose work impresses you. You can ask if they'd be willing to have a 15-minute conversation about their day-to-day job and how they like working at the company. Finally, join a LinkedIn group. These are groups of people in a particular industry or who share a specific interest. There are dozens of groups already dedicated to UX design, so join one or two that interest you. Get involved in the group conversation, then feel free to connect with folks in the group. You can also follow a specific company or hashtag on LinkedIn, like #UXDesign, to learn new trends, read articles, and chat with people who share your interests. Another great place to network with professionals is on Twitter. If you aren't familiar with Twitter, it's a social media platform where you can follow people, interact with their posts, and share your own ideas. Twitter isn't as focused on professional networking as LinkedIn. It's usually better for reading posts from prominent people in the UX design industry, starting conversations with peers, and learning from industry thought leaders on a more personal level. It's okay if you're not ready to start tweeting about your UX design knowledge while you're still learning about the field. You might start by following industry insiders and liking and retweeting their posts. If you're feeling bold, you can add to the conversation by replying to their tweets. You can also tag industry professionals in your own tweets. This is just like striking up a conversation in real life. Who knows, they might want to connect. Keep in mind that LinkedIn and Twitter have different tones, and it's a good idea to treat them that way. You might be more professional and focused on LinkedIn, but more open and conversational on Twitter. That's great. It gives recruiters and other designers the opportunity to see different sides of your personality. Remember, anything you post on social media is public-facing. Even private messages to other users can be copied and shared widely. So be smart about what you post and like. You should also be smart about sharing photos or posts that don't align with the personal brand you're developing as a UX designer. When in doubt, set your personal accounts to private mode. There's a reading included this week that outlines how to do just that. All right, you've got LinkedIn and Twitter covered. Now, let's keep going with popular online UX design communities. We just discussed how LinkedIn and Twitter are great places to network with recruiters and professionals. There are also online communities specifically for UX designers. Having a presence on one of these sites is a fantastic way to gain exposure and demonstrate your skills in UX design. In this video, we'll talk about some of the most popular UX design communities: Dribbble, Behance, and Medium. You can create accounts on these sites to learn more about UX design in general and to get design inspiration from other professionals. In addition, posting your own designs on these sites is a great way to get feedback on your work from experienced UX designers. To get started, let's dig into Dribbble. Dribbble, that's 3 Bs, is a community of designers who want to share their work, ask for feedback, get inspiration, and find jobs. The designs that people share on Dribbble are usually not full case studies like what's in your portfolio. Instead, they are small snapshots of work that highlight a particular skill or interest like branding, product design, or typography. If there's a specific design you like, you can follow that designer. It's also helpful to check out designers with the most followers in order to understand popular kinds of designs and get ideas about how to present yourself effectively. Similarly, you can follow teams on Dribbble. These might include companies like Google or independent design groups that have their own pages. Plus, liking and commenting on projects is a great way to start conversations with other designers and make connections in the UX design community. Finally, Dribbble is a great community to join if you're looking for a job. Dribbble has a robust job search forum, including a job board and a freelance marketplace. Employers pay to list their jobs and internships in this forum, so the posted positions are legitimate opportunities. In addition, recruiters look for designers on Dribbble, so being an active member is another way to demonstrate your skills and get hired. A second popular community for UX designers is Behance. Many features on Behance are similar to Dribbble. For example, you can discover designs from around the world and follow specific designers. Behance also has a job board that features full-time jobs, freelance roles, and internships. You can narrow your search on the job board down to very specific fields. In addition, designers frequently live stream from Behance to demonstrate their skills in real time. Finally, a third online community for UX designers is Medium. You might be familiar with Medium already. It's a popular blogging platform featuring articles on all kinds of topics. There's a vibrant UX design community on Medium, specifically at UX Collective, a subset of the website. Medium is pretty different from Dribbble and Behance. For example, on Medium, your designs are not the main attraction. Instead, the Medium community focuses on long-form writing about UX design, sometimes including visuals. So start reading. There are lots of articles on Medium from leaders in UX design, including Googlers. Medium is a great place to discover the processes of top designers and learn about industry trends. We even have a Google Design collection. Keep in mind that articles on blogging sites like Medium should be considered opinion pieces, not objective research. That said, you can still learn a lot from the resources on Medium, like tips for using a specific design software or how to build equity and accessibility into your work. You can communicate with other designers by responding to articles in the comments section and giving claps, which are basically Medium's like button. You can also follow designers who inspire you and sign up for their newsletters. It's a great way to expand your network. You can even publish your own Medium post. Medium offers plenty of resources to help you get started. Polish your story and find your audience. You can find more details on how to create a profile on each of these platforms in the course readings. Get creative, and don't be afraid to start posting your design ideas, requesting feedback, and becoming an active member of online UX design communities. You'll do great. Next, we're going to explain how recruiters and interviewers might check out your online presence. See you there. Okay, we've covered the essentials of a good portfolio and the importance of communicating your personal brand. Next up, let's talk about writing concisely and articulately in your portfolio. Communicating through design and through writing are similar skills. The main goal for writing your portfolio is to structure the information clearly and concisely. Focus on highlighting the most important parts of your story and keep your writing succinct and easy to skim. Most recruiters and hiring managers review a lot of portfolios. You want them to stay engaged. Let's start with your introduction. The introduction to you and your portfolio should go above the fold on the homepage of your website. The term above the fold comes from the design of a newspaper. If you're holding a newspaper in your hands, The most important information is on the top part of the front page, before you unfold it or flip it over. The same concept applies to websites. What's above the fold is the content on a website that doesn't require scrolling down. Your introduction should be clear and to the point. Your name and what you do. You might also include something that establishes your personal brand. For example, "Hi, I'm Michael. I believe that creative collaboration between design and technology is the magic that takes experiences from good to great." If a recruiter is searching for a motion designer and can immediately tell that's your specialty by glancing at the introduction on your home page, then great. They're more likely to continue going through your portfolio. But if your homepage uses vague language or doesn't communicate anything at all, the recruiter might not bother going further. Next up, the About Me page. This is exactly what it sounds like, a professional page about you. Try reading About Me pages on the websites of a few UX designers or companies you admire. You can write in more detail on your About Me page, since you want potential employers and recruiters to be able to learn more about you. You might include what kind of work you do, what you're passionate about, or things you value, where you work currently if your job is in a related field, your credentials, like this certificate and any additional education, any notable projects, clients, or awards, and your contact information, including your email address, links to your profiles on professional networking sites, and where you currently live. And finally, you want to include descriptions of your work in your portfolio. Within the case study for each project, you should write about the topics we discussed earlier, such as your role in the project, your process, and the final design. Throughout your portfolio, let your designs tell the story and provide evidence of your talent. To keep your writing concise and articulate, here are a few tips. Use as few words as possible to make your point. Avoid complicated language. You don't need 3 adjectives when one specific one will do. The words you choose should be clear descriptors, not buzzwords. Avoid jargon. Jargon are industry terms that people who don't work in UX design may not know. Your writing should be easy to understand and approachable. Include keywords that might be in a job description or concepts that every UX designer should know, like the user journey or design sprint. This is a good way to increase your site's discoverability on search engines. Inject personality. Be conversational. Your website should accurately reflect you, your work, and your brand you've established. Last tip, find a trusted editor. Everyone, even professional writers, make mistakes. Ask a friend to check your writing for spelling and grammatical errors, or to point out any places where the writing is distracting from the projects you're trying to highlight. That's it. Now you know some tips for writing in your portfolio. Writing well takes practice, and it might take a few tries to get it right. You'll have the opportunity to practice your writing in an upcoming activity. If you're having trouble, check out the discussion forum and ask a classmate for advice. Coming up, we'll talk about building a cohesive and consistent presence online. Let's keep going. Hi again. Good job setting up profiles on social media sites and UX design communities. These profiles are helpful to find a job and to connect with other UX designers. Now, we're going to put your online profile to use. In this video, we'll discuss networking and finding a mentor, and how both of these can help you kickstart your career in UX design. Before we dig in, let's explore why networking is important. Networking means interacting with other people to develop professional contacts and learn more about a job industry. You can network online or in person. Networking can be strictly professional. For example, you might attend a lecture at a design conference and meet other UX designers in the audience. You can extend your conversation beyond the conference by connecting with your new acquaintance on LinkedIn or other online platform. Or you might find someone on LinkedIn who works at a company you're interested in. You can send them a personalized message and ask them to share details about their experience as a UX designer. Or you can connect with folks who are also enrolled in this program in the discussion forum. Beyond a professional focus, networking is social too. Your network includes all of the people you already know, from former teachers and counselors to your distant relatives. You can join a professional organization to expand your network too. You can find design-related associations in your area by searching online, asking your local librarian, or visiting a workforce development office for advice. Many of these professional organizations hold happy hours or picnics so members can connect in a more relaxed setting. It's smart to think about the benefits of social connections over the long term. A new person you meet at a happy hour might not be able to advance your career right now, but if you keep in touch, in the future, your new friend might know someone who is looking to hire a UX designer at their company. You never know where your connection might lead. Making connections with people in the UX design industry is also an excellent way to find a mentor. A mentor is someone in your field who gives you advice about your career. A mentor can be someone with many years of experience in UX design, who can provide tips on growing your career, organizations to join, and books to read. Or a mentor can be a newbie UX designer who gives pointers about creating an online portfolio or acing the job interview. Keep in mind, most people like to help other people succeed, and experienced UX designers remember what it's like to start their career. Don't be afraid to seek out a mentor. You might be surprised how happy people are to help you. There are a lot of ways to find a mentor. Is there someone you used to work with who you admire? Is there an event coming up in your community where you can meet someone new? Or should you send a message to the designer on Behance that you love to follow? When you find a mentor and are ready to ask for their advice, be prepared. It's helpful to have clear goals for the conversation. Some topics you might want to ask a mentor about include finding your first UX design job, developing specific skills, or learning a new tool, moving from the type of company you currently work at into UX design, specializing in a type of design like interaction, visual, or motion versus being a generalist designer, or getting feedback on your portfolio. Before the first meeting with your new mentor, write a list of questions that you want to ask her. This will help you feel prepared and keep the conversation flowing. After the first meeting, you should consider how often you want to meet moving forward. It helps to set the expectation about your relationship up front. For example, you might want to meet at a local coffee shop once a month, or check in over the phone every other month. Networking and finding a mentor can be a lot of fun. The more you take part in conversations in this program's discussion forum, on social media, and in UX design communities, the more comfortable you'll become with talking to new people. It gets easier and more natural with practice. An early mentor of mine provided some great advice that I still use today. She suggested sharing my work with the design community regularly to receive feedback. She also taught me that it's important to not just focus on what I can get from networking, but more importantly, what I can give back to the community. I think we can all really benefit from a mentor's advice. Start building connections now, and it will prove valuable to you in the long term. If you're nervous about meeting new people or sharing your work with the world, that's completely normal. In the next video, we'll talk about overcoming imposter syndrome so you can shine. See you there. Good to see you again. In the last video, we talked about the importance of networking and having a mentor. Like we said, networking gets easier with practice, and it's completely normal to be nervous at first. One obstacle we all face when growing our career is imposter syndrome, which is what we're going to talk about in this video. Imposter syndrome is the belief that you're unskilled, inferior to others, or bad at your job, despite your successes. In other words, imposter syndrome occurs when you think you're a bad designer, even when everyone else tells you you're a great designer. Everyone feels like an imposter sometimes. From the brand new person on your team to Google's most senior leaders, imposter syndrome looks different for each person. But there are some telltale red flags. Symptoms of imposter syndrome might include lack of self-confidence, feeling like a fraud, constant comparison to other people, self-doubt, not trusting your intuition and capabilities, negative self-talk, or irrational fears of the future. Do any of those sound familiar to you? In professional settings, imposter syndrome can come to life in many ways. A few examples include not applying to jobs unless you meet every requirement, taking on extra work to make sure you're doing it all, and shrugging off compliments. There are countless reasons why we might feel imposter syndrome. The good news is that there are some small steps we can take when imposter syndrome kicks in. First, acknowledge the thoughts. Recognize how you're feeling and think about why you're feeling this way. Understand your own patterns, and identifying situations that make you feel imposter syndrome is a helpful place to start. Second, own your accomplishments. Your success is not due to luck or help from others. Your success is due to your intelligence and hard work. Take responsibility for the role you played in the accomplishment. Third, make a list. Write down 5 things that show you're qualified for the job you are considering. Or write down 5 accomplishments you're proud of. Focus on all the unique skills you can bring to the table. Fourth, have a conversation. To address your inner critic, it's helpful to talk about what's going on in your mind. Many people hesitate to share how they feel because they're scared about how others might respond. But remember your new mentor? I bet they still feel like an outsider sometimes too, especially when they change jobs or take new responsibilities at work. Ask your mentor how they handle imposter syndrome. Lastly, realize you are not alone. If you feel like an imposter, no matter what the reason, you are not the only one. UX designers with decades of experience still feel like frauds at times. I still get imposter syndrome every now and then too. Figuring out my strengths as a designer over the years has helped me become more confident in myself. I also find that celebrating my achievements has helped make creeping feelings of imposter syndrome go away. Starting a new job or changing careers takes time. Give yourself a break and understand that you'll make mistakes along the way. By taking this program, you are already proving that you have curiosity, persistence, and grit. And this demonstrates you have the drive to be successful. If you start questioning your ability, remind yourself that everyone started off at the beginning. So the next time you feel you're not good enough to be a designer, consider whether it's just a bad case of imposter syndrome. If you acknowledge that feeling and follow the advice from this video, it might seem less scary.
My name is Catherine, and I'm Vice President of User Experience at Google. My first exposure to tech was probably in my senior year in a summer program that was called WISE, Women in Science and Engineering. I'll never forget that experience. I was working in a pathology lab, and I felt like a total imposter. I was the only high school student working with all these people in this medical lab. And one day, the doctor who I was working for handed me some graph paper, and he said, "Catherine, could you create these graphs for us?" and gave me some data. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I looked at the graph paper and I thought, I remember my mother, who's an academic, had this new software program where you could create graphs using software. And I thought, okay, I'm going to actually try and create the graphs instead of on graph paper in this software program. And I went home and I did it. And I was really happy with how my bar charts and my pie charts came out. And I brought them back. And the whole staff, they thought I was from the future. They had never seen anything like this before. They were so impressed. And suddenly I went from feeling like a total imposter to the smartest person in the room. So it was my first lesson in realizing that so often You feel like an imposter when you're in a new role or a new situation, or maybe you're younger or you don't have as much experience, but everybody's got something unique that they can bring to the table and value that they can add. That experience has definitely carried through in terms of my love of working on software products and also in terms of how I approach new challenges. One of the things that was very obvious to me early on when I started my professional career, and even in my education, I was in an industrial engineering program, was that I was one of the few women in my program. It was often doubly intimidating. If I was taking a new job, I was the one with the least experience, and I sometimes was the only female in the room. What I came to learn to do was to use that intimidation as fuel. And one of my most important philosophies is always to ask my peers, whether they were male or female or more senior or more junior, to ask for help. And without fail, people were always willing to help me. And very quickly, I would go from a place from feeling intimidated and maybe out of place to suddenly having bonds and connections with people and recognizing that these people were more than happy and in most cases actually really wanted to see me succeed. I'll never forget when I had my first mentor. My boss came to me, I was probably a year into my very first job in my career, and said, "Hey, Catherine, I'd like you to work with Joe. I think he'd be a really great mentor for you." And someone who was new in the field, I suddenly thought, what have I done wrong? I mustn't be doing my job correctly. Why am I getting a mentor? I was thinking it was some bad thing and some kind of punishment. And very quickly realized how I completely had misinterpreted my manager's intentions. I look at different people and things that I value that they do, whether it's someone's public speaking or someone's business acumen or someone who is able to influence, and I will ask them or try to model their behavior. So I feel like I've had many mentors throughout my career to help me with different things. One of my pieces of advice for people new to the field of user experience would be to leverage the community. It's really such an amazing open community of people. And if you're new to it, it can be daunting and intimidating. There's so much that may be unknown. So join some local groups who focus on user experience. Find a mentor, find a peer. You will be amazed how people are willing to help you, whether it's reviewing your portfolio or helping you think about companies that would be a good match for your skill set. So I absolutely encourage you to leverage the amazing community of user experience professionals out there who are open and willing to help.
Congratulations! You've completed the first course in the program. You worked incredibly hard, and it shows. You should be very proud of yourself. Back when you started this program, you might have been nervous or excited, or both. And you might have wondered what UX even meant. Now look at you. You now know what a UX designer does and what drives us to make products better for users. Plus, you already started building your portfolio and thinking about your career. Let's review your accomplishments. In this course, you discovered user experience and why it's important for users and businesses, and learned what makes a design good for the user. Identified different disciplines within UX and what sort of tasks you might do as a UX designer. Learn the common tools, frameworks, and platforms used in UX design. Identify the steps of a design sprint and how you, as an entry-level UX designer, can take part in that process. And start developing your portfolio, personal brand, and online profiles so that you can start networking. You've covered a lot. You have a solid foundation in user experience that you can add to throughout the rest of this program. We'll build on your knowledge in the next course, where we'll get started with user research, understanding design problems, and brainstorming early solutions. Emily, who you met briefly in the introduction to the program, will be your guide for the next course. Emily is a fantastic instructor and really knowledgeable about the field of UX, so get ready to learn a lot. Now it's time for me to sign off. It's been such a pleasure taking you through this course. I can't wait to experience your designs in action one day. Good luck as you continue the program.